Good evening and welcome to the July 19th Churchill Borough public hearing for a conditional use application submitted by Churchill Creek. Gavin, if you've heard that, please shake your head or give me a thumbs up. Welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Alex Graziani. I'm the borough manager here in Churchill. Mainly the camera that you're seeing now will be focused on the 4 members present of the Churchill Borough Council plus the mayor. Before I get into the technical manners to access this meeting and participate this evening, I will let Gavin start the meeting off. At least we may want to do roll call after that and Gavin will get us started. Go ahead, Gavin.
Thanks, Alex. I was thinking, let's just wait maybe a couple more minutes. It's about 3 after now. Let's give it till 5 after just to make sure there's anyone with potential technical difficulties or is trying to sign in late. Let's make sure we give a little extra time. And then after that, I will ask the court reporter to go ahead and put us on the record, and then we could do a council roll call. We'll do some housekeeping items, particularly with respect to the technology and the access issues. And I'm hopeful you can help me explain that, Alex, because you're more of the Zoom master than I am. And then we'll go through an outline of the hearing tonight, and then we'll move right into things. So we'll just give it another minute or so.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Alex, I think we're ready to go. I'm ready to go if you are. You want to go ahead and put us back in grid mode there? Thank you, sir. Kim, if you go ahead and we'll go on the record at this point. Okay. This is the time and the place for the public hearing on the conditional use application filed by the applicant, Churchill Creek Project LLC, for the property located at 1310 Beulah Road, that's B-E-U-L-A-H, Pittsburgh, PA 15235. The applicant is proposing to construct a distribution center at the former George Westinghouse Research and Technology Park. The subject property, which is Allegheny County block and lot number 370, N as in Nancy 350, is located in the C1 commercial zoning district of the borough. A distribution center may be authorized as a conditional use in the C1 zoning district of the borough, subject to the requirements of the Churchill Borough zoning ordinance, including section 304-37.1. As is apparent, this hearing is being held via remote video conference. Per the advertisement, the accommodations were made for those folks who did not have the technological capability of participating via the Zoom app. Alex, just for the record, can you tell us how many individuals are at the borough building as far as members of the public?
Looks like we have 1 present in the Churchill Borough Zoom room.
Okay, thank you. In addition, the borough has retained the services not only of our court reporter tonight, but also a closed captioner. I think that may be the proper job title, to ensure that those individuals who may have trouble hearing what's occurring during the hearing are able to follow along and participate. So why don't we go ahead and first start with a roll call of council. Mr. Graziani, could I ask you to handle that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, let's call the roll, please.
Kevin Collins.
Here.
Matt Castiglia,
Here.
Valerie Renthaler,
Here.
Norma Greco,
Here.
Adam McDowell,
Here.
Jay Doran, Diane Law,
Here.
and Mayor Paul Gamrat.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graziani. At this point, could I ask you to just give a general overview of not necessarily the hearing, because I'll cover that as part of my outline, but just generally how the raising of hands and the acknowledgement and the sort of bringing up an attendee to panelist level so that they can provide testimony, how that will all work. And keeping in mind too, and one of the things I will touch on most likely repeatedly over the course of tonight is to remember that we do have a court reporter and closed captioner taking down everything that is said. So if you could, everyone on the call, whether you're a member of the public, whether you're an experienced lawyer, whether you're a council member or a borough manager, if you could keep in mind that, you know, what we want to do is make sure we have a clean transcript. So please talk slowly and deliberately to the extent possible. Go ahead, Alex.
With that introduction, I will be the first to claim that I didn't mute myself when I was talking to Vice President Law this evening, just so you can see that anyone is capable of erroring in the Zoom format. But we do want to keep this clear. So you're in a webinar in the Zoom format. And what that means is you are able to raise your hand, and when there is public comment to be made, we will work with you to promote you to a panelist, which will enable you to do two things, and possibly three if you're interested. First, you'll be able to unmute yourself and speak. Second, you'll be able to enable your camera so you may be seen. And lastly, if you like and so choose, you may share your screen to share a slide or an image, and we'll try to get that in as an exhibit as well. What is different between now and the July 14th Planning Commission meeting is the Q&A. Due to the nature of a public hearing, it quite frankly isn't appropriate to have question and answer. You think of it as Judge Judy's courtroom. Not everybody from the gallery can just simply ask the judge when they've got a question. And that's sort of how we're operating tonight. So you may be wondering, why don't I have a Q&A at the bottom? How come I can't unmute myself? I don't see that mic. And again, why can't I make my camera come on? Again, that's because you are a webinar attendee. You are viewing a public hearing. Currently, we have 18 panelists, which are made up of the applicant and various members of council and the staff for the borough. And there are 115 attendees. I imagine that number will fluctuate from time to time. Again, we will be promoting people from an attendee role to a panelist role when it's their time to speak. As Gavin mentioned, we do have a room that is available for people who do not have at home ability to be seen and be heard and to see and to hear. So we want to make sure they can have that at home. Meanwhile, Gavin will be covering this, I'm sure, but people may be able to email me, you know, the exhibits or the testimony that they'll be presenting. If you would like to text me during the meeting, please text 412-758-8818. I will not be answering questions, but I may be able to help if there's a technical difficulty only. Only with technical issues will I be able to help with, but I do want to make that available. 412-758-8818. That's very important for the people, particularly the panelists. Like for example, Mr. Ferguson, if you have a technical difficulty and you're not coming through, text me and I'll try to work that out for you. Gavin, did I cover everything that you wanted to this evening?
Yes, thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. So we already mentioned that we have a court reporter. We are going to be taking a couple scheduled breaks around every couple hours. The plan tonight is to go absolutely no later than 11. We'll see how we are between the 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock hour and try to pick an appropriate time to recess the hearing to a future date. We're very confident that we're not going to be able to get in all of the necessary testimony and evidence to complete the hearing this evening. Council had discussed at a prior meeting the potential second date of this coming Thursday at 6:00 p.m. We will finalize that and formalize that prior to the recessing of this particular meeting. So again, we do have a court reporter taking down the transcript. We will need to also keep in mind that when there's documentary evidence to be presented, we need to make sure that that is marked clearly by the witness or the party that is presenting the evidence and made a part of that record. So there's two sort of aspects to this public hearing that we need to ensure we have a public record for. One is the testimony, and that's what the court reporter is for, to ensure that everything is spoken, is taken down, and becomes part of the hearing transcript. Secondly, we will have the exhibits, some of which will be in electronic format, some of which will be in paper format. The applicant has provided a exhibit book in advance of the hearing, and Attorney Ferguson, on behalf of some resident objectors, has provided a set of exhibits as well. In addition, those folks who are testifying and are submitting any sort of evidence beyond their testimony, we are asking that if you could immediately follow up after the hearing by providing a copy of that to the borough manager at his email address, which is available on the website. So stepping back just a little bit as to why we're here this evening. Anyone who's attended any of the last 7 or 8 planning commission meetings and around that same amount of borough council meetings is aware that this application has been pending to redevelop the former Westinghouse site into a distribution center. There are 2 tracks for approval that are required by the applicant in order to demolish any buildings, move any earth, obtain any permits from the borough to actually start the project. What's in front of Borough Council tonight is what's called the conditional use application. And the obligation or the burden of the applicant tonight is to establish that they meet the criteria under the zoning code to permit them to construct and develop the site as a distribution center in accordance with the Churchill Borough Zoning Code. It's the role of council to serve in what we call a quasi-judicial capacity, meaning that council is here similar to a judge at a trial. They will listen to the evidence. They do have the ability to ask questions. I've suggested that they hold off on that until the end of the hearing. But ultimately, it's council's decision or council's role to determine whether or not the applicant has established compliance with the zoning code. And if so, the applicant is entitled to approval. That approval can come with conditions, or it can be just an approval with no conditions. If council determines that the applicant has not met the criteria in the zoning code for conditional use approval, then it is council's role to deny that application. So the second sort of aspect of the approval that's required by the applicant in order to actually move forward with the project is what's called land development approval. Land development approval is a more site-specific, things like geotechnical work, the third-party permits, such as PennDOT or the Conservation District are usually part of that approval. And really the more detailed site plan aspects, which are contained in the subdivision ordinance of the Borough Code. So that application has been on hold pending the determination by council as to the zoning approval under the conditional use. So if the applicant would obtain approval, the next step would be for the applicant to then present its application for land development through the Planning Commission, similar to the way the conditional use went, and then ultimately for a vote by Borough Council. Only after that time and subject to whatever conditions, both by way of conditional use and by way of land development, would the applicant then be able to proceed with their project. So that's a very general overview. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more tonight and throughout the following hearings about the specific relevant criteria for this particular use. We will go ahead then and start moving now towards the hearing. What I'd first ask is if we could have the court reporter swear in all witnesses and potential witnesses prior to us moving into the hearing portion.
For anyone that's going to give any testimony whatsoever, or if you're going to speak, may think you might speak, just go ahead and raise your right hand and I will swear you in. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Indicate yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Where I'd like to start is before we turn it over to the applicant to call their first witness, I'd like Mr. Graziani to confirm on the record first that the proper newspaper advertisements were published in a newspaper of general circulation in the borough. I can't hear you.
That is correct. And we have proof of publication in hand.
Thank you. So we'll make proof of publication, Borough Exhibit 1. Do you also have photographs of the postings of the property as required by the municipality's planning code?
Due to the size of the parcel being 135 acres, we posted 12 different locations, and we have proof via photographs of those locations at the various public spots of the property. So yes, per municipality's planning code, it has been posted.
All right, and we'll make those photographs Borough's Exhibit 2. I would ask that the Planning Commission memorandum that was issued from the Planning Commission to Borough Council and which has been posted, I believe, on the Borough website. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, we'll have that entered into the record as Borough's Exhibit 3. And from a housekeeping standpoint, that's basically it. Let me run through a general outline of how this hearing is going to be run. And we're going to try to do it in the most efficient manner. But we do ask for everyone's patience, not only because of the technology that we're using that some of us are still getting familiar with, but generally with as many parties to a matter such as this, there are bound to be some hiccups along the way. So we are all going to do our best, no matter what side of this application you're on, whether you're for it or against it. It's extremely important that we end up with a clean evidentiary record due to the potential or even likelihood of an appeal in this matter down the line. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we work through this hearing. And I think we have a good game plan as to how we're going to ensure that Borough Council hears all the evidence, all the testimony from not only parties and objectors and the applicant and its witnesses, but also ultimately from the general public. So the way that we're going to proceed starting tonight will be the applicant will call its witnesses. After the applicant completes its examination of its first witness, the objectors or party objectors to this case, and we'll touch on that more in a minute, will have an opportunity to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses one by one. So after the applicant's completed its examination, we'll start with those objectors who are represented by counsel. And so Mr. Ferguson, I know, is one who's entered his appearance on behalf of a number of residents. So we will give him the first opportunity to cross-examine. I don't know, and we'll find out shortly here, if there are any other objectors who are represented by legal counsel. If not, that's perfectly fine. But those folks who are seeking party objector status, after Mr. Ferguson has completed his cross-examination, will have an opportunity themselves to ask questions and cross-examine the witness. Then after the applicant has completed its case, we will have the borough engineers and their subconsultants provide a report based on their review of the studies that have been submitted in this matter. And those individuals or those representatives, consultants, and engineers will be subject to questioning by both the applicant's legal team and also the objectors. When the engineers and subconsultants have completed their testimony, we will turn it over to the party objectors to present their case. They will be able to present their own witnesses and provide whatever testimony and evidence in opposition to the application that they would like to. After each of those witnesses, applicant's counsel will have an opportunity to cross-examine. There will be a time after the objectors have completed their case for rebuttal by the applicant. I would hope that would be limited depending on how much ground has been covered between now and then, but we will allow the applicant to reserve the right to do so. Then we will have time for questions from counsel. If there are still open items that they have questions about, counsel will have an opportunity to question witnesses who have previously testified or not. And then ultimately, we will close the hearing with a segment for public testimony or public comment from non-party residents and taxpayers. So even if you decide you're not seeking party objector status in this particular hearing, you will be given a time at the end of the hearing to provide testimony. It will not be subject to the 3-minute time limit, although we will ask you to be respectful of the time that folks have invested in this. But certainly council wants to hear from every resident and taxpayer who wants to provide an opinion either for or against this project. So with that said, let's touch on the party objectors first. just again, as another housekeeping item. So there's members of the public will essentially have two different roles. You either be a party objector to the case, and that means that you are a party, you believe you have standing as an aggrieved party to serve as a party objector to the case. And you will again be in a position to not only cross-examine witnesses, but also ultimately present your own case and call your own witnesses. So the first thing that we will do is try to identify those folks at the hearing who are seeking party objector status, and essentially setting those folks aside from the public in general, which will again have an opportunity to provide testimony at the end of the hearing. So I know this is it's been a long-winded introduction. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I reserve the right to go back and cover some of the other additional ground rules. Mr. Graziani, is there anything else that from a preliminary standpoint that you think I missed?
Well, just one thing, if a person this evening wants to identify themselves as an objector, I will be, I guess, promoting them. They'll need to raise their hand, A, and then B, I'll promote them to become a panelist, which will enable them to unmute. What they'll see on their end is the host is asking you to unmute. Obviously, please then at that time, unmute yourself. And all you'll need to do is say, yes, I do want to be an objector, or no, I had my hand up because I'm hoping to get first in line when public comment occurs. Does that make sense, Gavin? Does that work for you?
It does. I just would ask that it would not be useful to try to get yourself in line for public comment now, because that is likely several hearing days away. So I would ask that only those folks who are seeking party objector status raise your hand at this time, and we will identify you one by one. But I know that we want to start with Mr. Ferguson because he has notified the borough that he represents several residents. So we want to make sure we identify those residents specifically, because they will be providing or essentially conferring their right to question on Mr. Ferguson, although they will be permitted to provide their own testimony during the objector's case in chief later on. So with that said, Mr. Ferguson, do you want to identify for the record who your clients are, who you're representing during these hearings?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Robb. So in advance of this hearing, I provided a document setting forth the names and addresses and the distances from the boundaries of the subject site, which I have marked as Exhibit A, which is the list of clients, and Exhibit A1 is a map identifying their locations. If you would like me to display that, I can. If anybody wants to see it, that's fine. Otherwise, as I know opposing counsel has already seen that, I'd just like to move for the admission of Exhibit A and Exhibit A1.
Mr. Ferguson, it may be helpful to read the names only because I've noticed some hands go up on the attendees and they might not realize their names were included there, and it'll save us the effort. So if you would please be so kind to read those names, I think it will be most helpful.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Graziani. I hope no one is surprised that I'm representing them. Would you like the addresses as well?
Not necessary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here are the names of those that I represent. I didn't count them, but it is not a long list. David and Kathy Bordner, Elena Nelson, Glenn and Valerie Waters, Joanne and Guy Skanga, S-C-A-N-G-A, Julie Carl, C-A-R-Y-L, Katie and Jack Hill, Murray Bilby, Nicole Phillips, Rose Salata, Lawrence Scheck, Steve Landay, Torrance and Rebecca Lewis, and William Giglio. That's the list.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Ferguson. And I know, Mr. Ferguson, you do have another item that you want to cover before we get into the hearing. I would ask, though, that we first identify any other potential party objectors. And I know, Mr. Graziani, that you have received correspondence from some individuals who have acknowledged that they want to seek party status. So I don't know if we have hands that you want to start with, or if you want to start with your list, just to make sure we have everyone covered.
Mr. Rob, you'll have to give me a moment to grab the list. I want to get through the hands first that are raised. First, I see in the virtual room here at the Borough Building, a hand raised. And I imagine Miss Ruthie Ray wants to speak. Is that correct? If you guys could speak from that room.
That's correct.
Thank you. So I will lower that hand. Meanwhile, Ken Balke, I see you're up first. Ken, would you like to be an objector or viewed as an objector within this hearing?
Again, because I'm in an appointed position by the Churchill Borough Council, I seek council input. Obviously, the presentation I'm going to have raises concerns on the tree removal. I'm looking for advice from council because I said I've been appointed by council to the position I hold as chair of the tree committee. So I appreciate getting clarification from you. You know,
So,
do I need to move?
So, Mr. Balke, in your role as chairman of the tree committee, so you would not be representing the tree committee as a party objector, but as a resident of the borough, you would have standing to operate as a party objector. So, you know, you could essentially you could represent yourself as a party objector, but you'd have to be clear that, you know, it's not in your role as a chairman of the tree committee.
Thank you for that clarification. Given that I just talked to my wife, we will reserve his public comment. And given that you're letting me, all my presentation is based on just the tree committee. And if we have public comments later based on it, we'll come in that. But Ruth Ann and I do not have a plan to come in as filing objector status.
Thank you, Mr. Balke.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure.
Elizabeth Kassman, would you please say whether or not you want to come in as an objector for the hearing?
Yes, I'd like to be an objector.
And Ms. Kassman, could you provide your address as well, please?
8 Holland Road.
And I'm sorry, I know we have Ms. Ray's address, but just to make sure for the benefit of council, particularly applicants council, Ms. Ray, could you provide your address?
We have to.
I live at 35 Holland Road.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Graziani, I'll turn it back over to you for the next person.
Next person with their hand up is Odette. Would you please let us know whether you'd like to come in as an objector?
Yes, I would.
Thank you.
Can you please state your full name, Odette, and your address?
Odette Ransom, 884 Graham Boulevard, Pittsburgh 15221.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I may be leaving this computer and going to another one so I could share with my husband.
No problem.
Okay.
We'll do our best to work with you. Jill Stewart, would you please identify yourself, name, address, and your willingness to participate as an objector?
What?
Gavin, sometimes I'm a little slow on that, so she's now just getting unmuted. Go ahead, Jill. Jill was one of the individuals who had listed their name with me earlier, so we could probably just submit that for the record.
Do we have an address for Ms. Stewart?
I have it. I'll have to pull it up here in a minute. Just give me a moment to find that spreadsheet.
I think it's 2507 Greensburg Pike is what I believe I have.
That is correct.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stewart.
Thanks, Jill. And I also have Sandy Fox, and she has also been someone at 38 Holland Road who has submitted in writing that she'd like to be considered as an objector. So Sandy, there's no need for me to unmute you. I assume that's staying the same, correct?
If you didn't unmute her, how are you going to know if she says yes?
I did unmute her.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Chris McMullen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Chris McMullen, 830 Graham Boulevard, and I would like objector status. Thanks.
Thank you. Anthony Wilson, who's also, I believe, somebody we've got. He lives at 828 Grand Boulevard. He had submitted something prior to the meeting. Anthony, are you want to come in as an objector?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Robin has her hand up, but I think Robin might possibly, the Robin I see, might be one of Gateway's subs for the air quality report. So Robin, I'm going to hit unmute for you. Why don't you go ahead if you want to be an objector because you're a citizen, state your name and address. But if you're part of Gateway's team, I'll just promote you to panelist.
No, I'm just a citizen of Churchill.
Okay, so do you want to be an objector or just reserve the right to speak later?
I do, and actually part of that is about air quality, so.
May I have your street address, please?
2527 Collins Road.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Renko.
Mr. Rob, I don't see other hands that are raised at this point. Now, from a technical standpoint, within the attendees, there's 145 attendees at this point, and there are 18 panelists for those who are keeping track. We do have a number of people on the phone who have chosen to call in this evening. I see a few of those numbers. How do you want to handle those? To do as we did for the Planning Commission, read the last 4 digits and then ask them to identify themselves? How would you like to handle those?
Well, let me first, Alex, if we could, I have 2 more names on my list of individuals who submitted in writing a request to be acknowledged as party objectors. One is Susan Starrett. Do we know if Ms. Starrett is with us?
Just give me a moment to scroll down.
Yeah,
I believe she is.
It's a lot of people.
She is present.
Okay. Could we ask to unmute her just to confirm that she still seeks that status?
Of course.
Gavin, no, I said I would be a commenter. That's okay. Well, I said that sometimes on appeal, they call those people objectors if they're counted as parties. So
are you, I guess my question then is, are you seeking party status in the case, or do you just plan to provide testimony during the public comment section?
Well, I plan to provide testimony during the comment section. Are you saying that that does not make me a party?
Correct. So that the general public, all residents and taxpayers, because it's a public hearing, are given the opportunity to provide testimony and evidence during the public comment portion. However, those individuals who are seeking party status, who would be aggrieved by a decision and would like to enforce their rights in that regard, do need to request party status and would be given an opportunity then to not only provide testimony on your own, but also to present other witnesses and to question other witnesses from other parties.
Okay, well, let's see. Let's see. I wrote you a letter.
I'm sorry. I'm not able to provide any kind of legal guidance to anyone but the borough, so I apologize for that.
Meanwhile, Gavin, a few more people have raised their hand. Do you have another person on our list that we had shared previous to the meeting?
I had Mr. Spurdies, who was on my list, who had requested party status. Well, maybe we'll give Ms. Starrett a minute to think about it and see if we can bring Mr. Spurdies up to see if he.
Yeah, we can allow Peter to identify himself, street address, and his wishes for this evening.
Peter Spurdies, 1903 Hampstead Drive. Yes, I'd still like to be an objector.
Thank you, Mr. Spurdies.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I've decided not to be an objector then because my spouse is, so.
Okay, we will reserve you an opportunity to speak at the end of the hearing, for sure.
Thank you. I will use that.
Good. Alex, any other hands up that we need to address?
There's a few more. Jacqueline Cavalier.
Yes, I apologize. That name is actually inaccurate. My real name is Suzanne, Suzanne, last name Donsky, Donsky. I live at 24 Holland, and the name Jacqueline Cavalier is attached to a different account I use for an organization, so we just ignore it. My husband is here as well and would also like to state his position as an objector.
Yes.
What's your?
My name is Barton, Barton Myers, Meyers, also 24 Holland Road.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Thank you. And Mr. Rob, I have Diana Yankus. I'm muting her. Diana, please.
That name sounds familiar.
Yes.
Oh, don't give me away. I haven't started yet. Yes, I am an objective statter. Objector. I'm an objector. And I also represent neighbors, but we do not have legal representation. So I'm speaking for a few others.
In this particular setting, you actually have to, only an attorney can represent others at the hearing. So you could certainly provide whatever testimony and evidence you'd like.
Yes, I will do that. Yeah.
All right. Do we have your address, Ms. Yankus?
2210 William Penn.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And another former council member, I should say, Don DeFranco. Don, why don't you go ahead and identify yourself, full street address, and let us know your preference for this evening's hearing. You are unmuted. Don DeFranco, please.
Alex, can you hear me? Yeah, my screen popped up. Do you unmute? Do you close the microphone when we're done speaking?
Yeah, I'll take care of that. Just worry. I just want to make sure I get Don a chance to speak because I see he's on. Well.
Okay, you're sure you're talking to Don then?
Yeah, it's internet's kind of breaking up, but yeah, Don DeFranco, 2332 Marbury Road. Also, like to have the option of being a dissenter or objector.
Thank you, Mr. DeFranco, or Dr. DeFranco, I should say.
At this point, Gavin, I do not see other hands raised, and we have gone over the list submitted to us previously.
Okay, well, folks, this is your opportunity. So, we really are hoping that we can identify all of you up front so that you're given a full opportunity to participate throughout the hearing as party objector. So
a number of people who are on the phone have been moved up to the top, and I'm going to read the last 4 digits. And then if they want to, they can simply identify themselves and say whether they want to be an objector. If not, they can simply say no, and I'll go ahead and mute them. So beginning with the phone ending in the last 4 digits, 1673, please go ahead and identify yourself and your preference for this evening's hearing. One more time, I see that they are unmuted. That's the last 4 digits, 1673. Okay, I'll make that assumption that they're not going to that. Of course, they'll have an opportunity later to speak. This would be for the phone number ending in 9764. You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you haven't already and speak.
Alex, that is Robin, who is the consultant to Gateway.
You are the man. Thank you for telling me that. I will promote them to panelists here in a minute. And then I have a last user who just says call in user 1. So I don't have the ability to know their last 4 digits. So if that rings a bell to you, go ahead and identify yourself and let us know whether you want to speak this evening.
I don't know if you misread my last 4 digits, 1683.
I see a 7-3 even as you're talking, but we'll take it.
Yes,
Please
it's
identify yourself.
1683 Gerald Moore, 2700 Chapel Hill Drive.
Thank you, Joe. Would you like to speak as a participant or as an objector this evening?
Participant.
Okay, we'll try to keep that in mind for later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. That was interesting. So I do have a hand up now while we've been talking. There was an individual who has identified themselves as Mark. Mark, I'm unmuting you. If you would like to speak this evening, as we've discussed, please speak and give us your full name and address.
Yes, this is Mark McDonald at 109 Huntington Drive. And I would like objector status.
And I'm Luann McDonald, Mark's wife, and I also would like objector status.
And that was 109 Huntington?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gavin, at this point, I don't see other hands up, and I've exhausted the ones that I was able to identify as an attendee. While I spoke, another hand did pop up. Let me scroll down and see if I can find that. Two hands, actually. And the first would be Yolanda, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and identify yourself.
Yes, I just wanted to know, would I have had to have submitted something in writing before asking to be an objector?
No.
Okay, then I would like objector status as well. My address is 2709 Saybrook Drive, Yolanda Covington Ward.
Thank you, Ms. Covington Ward.
Thank you.
Jennifer, if you would now, Huffman, go ahead and speak.
Yes, this is Jennifer Corona Huffman. I'm at 1618 Williamsburg Place, and I would like to speak in this evening's hearing.
And Ms. Corona Huffman, when you say you'd like to speak, there will be time for the general public to provide testimony, but are you seeking party objector status at this time?
No, I'm not. I apologize. I just was able to get on the meeting, so I heard everybody jumping in, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. So I apologize.
No problem at all. The public comment portion will be at the very end, most likely not this evening, but at a future hearing when we're finishing up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So Gavin, I see two hands that are raised at this point who have not been called upon. Just to reiterate, what we're looking for is what?
Those individuals who are seeking party objector status as opposed to the general public.
The difference being?
The difference being that the party objectors will have an opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, to present their own witnesses, in addition to providing testimony either in favor of or against. Well, I guess if you're a party objector, it's most likely going to be against the application. So
the people who choose not to do that but would like to speak at a later time in the hearing will still be allowed to speak for more than 3 minutes and provide their own comment and testimony. What they don't get is the ability to cross-examine when time appropriate the witnesses on either side, the borough representatives being the engineer primarily, and then also the applicant.
Correct. Thank you.
So those hands went, one changed. Ada, your hand is still up. So why don't you go ahead and speak?
Okay. Ada, ADA. I just want to make sure that I'm officially registered as an objector.
Could you give us your address, ma'am?
1407 Old Beulah Road.
And can you please spell your last name?
It is spelled Ezekoye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Been here.
I think that's all we need. We'll put you on our list. Thank you.
At this time, Gavin, there are no hands raised.
Okay, well, I think after 45 minutes, we think we've given everyone an opportunity to identify themselves. And at this time, I think we can get back to another preliminary matter that we need to resolve. And that is, I guess, let me step back and ask the applicant's counsel, who have been quietly and patiently waiting for the hearing to this point, whether or not you have any objection to any of the individuals who are seeking party objector status at this time.
Mr. Robb, this is Sean Gallagher on behalf of the applicant, and we would like to reserve our objections until a later date.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Okay, so we will proceed with the hearing with those individuals having party objector status. The way, again, we'll proceed will be that the applicant will put on their first witness after we resolve Mr. Ferguson's initial threshold issue. And then we will give an opportunity for those folks who have party objector status after Mr. Ferguson is done with his cross-examination to see if they have any additional questions on items that Mr. Ferguson may have not touched on or handled the way that they would have wanted to handle had they been asking the questions themselves. So with that said, Mr. Ferguson, why don't you explain, I think it was marked as your Exhibit B, and explain your position with regard to potential recusal of council members.
Thank you, Mr. Robb. So by letter dated today, we did submit a letter, and I know that Mr. Metz and Mr. Gallagher were also provided copies of this letter. It's addressed to Mr. Robb, and the letter from a high altitude is a request that council members Matt Castiglia, Jay Dworin, and Diane Law recuse themselves on the basis of publicly recorded statements that they have made, either advocating for this land development or indicating a predisposition to be in favor of the application. The detailed bases for that request are set forth in the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
And let me just say this too. Just understanding that and acknowledging that this letter was sent out today to Mr. Robb. Each of these three members of council are entitled to Mr. Robb's opinion and advice as to whether or not recusal is required. I think it's only important at this time that I at least raise the request for recusal. But this is going to be a long hearing, and I think that recusal would only become effective at the time of a vote. And I think we're at least a few hours, if not days or weeks away from a vote. So I don't have any problem, just as a courtesy, to recognize that there may need to be time for Mr. Robb to further consider the request and to take the time to advise council with regard to it.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. And of course, this was a very sort of last minute notification that we received of this. I have not had a chance to confer with members of council, in particular the three members of council who were identified in your letter. I would point out, number one, that it's ultimately the council members' decision, as you're aware, as to whether or not to recuse themselves, and they can either seek or ignore my advice on the particular subject. But I wanted to point out factually, just to be clear, from your, and I think it's evident on the face of your letter, that the comments that you are relying upon and seeking the recusal in fact relate to a legislative act by council in adopting the zoning amendment that would allow for this type of development to move forward, rather than any specific comments on the application, which I think you will agree with me had not been filed yet at the time these comments were made. The application, I believe, was December 7th. The comments that are cited in your letter as alleging predisposition of this particular matter, I think they're both in November of last year. So certainly can understand your position. I appreciate your willingness to allow council to, at least for now, proceed. Unless any of the council members would like to comment right now or make a decision on recusal, my recommendation to them would be to allow us, to at some point after this hearing, or at least tonight's hearing, to confer about that and discuss whether or not ultimately recusal is appropriate.
If I may, You're right as to council members Jay Dworin and Diane Law. Mr. Castiglio was not yet a member of council and so identified himself as a resident in his comments.
Right, but that was, you agree with me on the timeline though, correct?
Yes, I put the dates in the letter. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate
that. Don't disagree on that.
Okay. Does the applicant have any, would like to take any position on this particular request for recusal?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other party objectors would like to weigh in on this particular request by Attorney Ferguson? And the way we'll handle this, and this is maybe a good lesson for all of us in procedure, but whenever I address sort of the other party objectors that are not represented by Mr. Ferguson, the way to communicate a desire to make a comment, ask a question, whatever that may be, would be the old raise the electronic hand device, which I think everyone has shown that they're able to do. So we'll give that just a few more seconds. And assuming that there's no further input on that particular issue, I think we can go ahead. Are there any other preliminary matters that either the applicant or Mr. Ferguson or any other party objectors feel like we need to cover before I turn it over to the applicant for their first witness and presentation?
And no, Mr. Robb, the only other matter which could be regarded as preliminary is about scheduling hearing dates, and you've already indicated we'll discuss that later in the meeting.
Thank you very much. With that said, Mr. Metz, I think I can turn it over to you to present the case on behalf of the applicant.
Gavin, I have one thing to interject. As you can see on camera, possibly, the president of council, Jay Dorn, was having a little technical difficulties earlier. Jay, for the record, would you state your name, your title, and that you are present in the hearing?
Yes, Jade Warren, president of Churchill Borough Council. And
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Does he need to be sworn in?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My apologies. Routers can.
Mr. Metz, floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Robb, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Lafe Metz. I'm a real estate lawyer at Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney here in Pittsburgh. And together with my partner, Sean Gallagher, we represent the applicant, Churchill Creek Project, LLC, which is an affiliate of Hillwood Development from Dallas, Texas. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here together tonight. We appreciate it. The applicant has proposed to develop a distribution center on the former Westinghouse site in the borough. And as Mr. Robb was explaining, that property is zoned C1, and the borough's zoning code permits a distribution center to be constructed in the C1 zone as a conditional use. And so the zoning code sets forth 7 tests that the applicant has to satisfy to be entitled to this use as a distribution center. So what we'll do during the course of the hearing is that we intend to demonstrate how we satisfy each one of those 7 tests. And that's going to be done primarily through the testimony and reports that we're submitting. And these reports were prepared by our professional engineers. So Langan Engineering is our primary engineer. Ostergaard is their consultant on sound matters, and Epsilon is their consultant on air quality. So each one of these consultants has submitted their professional engineering report to the borough's engineers, Gateway Engineering. The reports have received comments and been revised a number of times to address those thorough comments from the borough engineers. The borough engineers now have approved all of these engineering studies in writing. And so we will conclude at the end of the hearing with our respectful request that Borough Council approve the conditional use on the basis of the approved engineering studies showing that we satisfy all of the tests in the ordinance. We recognize what a significant development that this is for the borough. And on behalf of Hillwood and their prospective tenant Amazon, we just wanted to express our appreciation to Borough Council, the Planning Commission, the Borough Manager and Solicitor, and the Borough Engineer for all of the time and energy that they have devoted to considering our application. And we also wanted to recognize and thank the members of the public for their sustained interest and comments on this project during the Planning Commission process. We have listened attentively to those comments, and we have made a substantial number of revisions and I think improvements to the project in response to those comments. So we are listening, and those comments are meaningful and they're appreciated. So I thank you very much, everyone, for your attention this evening. And with that, we're going to call our first witness, who is Mr. Brad Griggs from our potential tenant, Amazon. Brad, are you with us?
Alex, I see Mr. Griggs raising his hand. Are you able to promote him? You recall I mentioned something about hiccups in this process. This maybe is the first one, but I'm sure we'll smooth it out from here.
Good evening, Mr. Robb, members of council, Mr. Graziani, members of the public. Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. My name is Brad Griggs. I am a senior manager on Amazon's economic development team. I lead our Northeast and Mid-Atlantic economic development, community engagement, and expansion efforts. The project we are considering here of becoming a prospective tenant there in Churchill Borough is for a Amazon robotics sortable fulfillment center. It is our most state-of-the-art location in our logistics network. It is the point where our products and inventory that is sold in Amazon.com is available for purchase. It comes via line haul trucks to and from this site. It is a 24/7 operation that we anticipate would employ at least 1,000 to 1,500 full-time employees. Those employees would receive comprehensive benefits starting day one, including medical, dental, vision, 401k matching, parental leave, as well as career and workforce development skills as part of our career choice program, which provides reimbursable tuition or advanced degrees, licenses, pursuits for our employees here at Amazon. Those workers will all make at least $15 an hour starting wages alongside of those comprehensive benefits starting day one. There will also be a mix of managerial positions starting at least $60,000 a year for the positions within this fulfillment center. These products that are stored in this location are amongst the highest volume products that move through our logistics network. Typically, these items are, items that will fit inside of an airport security bin for a frame of reference or smaller. They are picked, they are packed, they are sorted at the locations. They're placed in Amazon packaging and sent out into our logistics networks to our customers and businesses for delivery. These locations are, a significant investment consideration for our company, and we appreciate the time and consideration that Churchill Borough, the council, the planning commission, the solicitor, all of the members here today on the call, as well as the public, have put into considering this prospective project. We're excited about the potential opportunity here. We anticipate, tremendous construction jobs from the region that will also be part of this project, that should it move forward, there'll be opportunities for constructing this facility, and then the additional long-term employment opportunity should this project move forward for this project here in Churchill and throughout the region. From that standpoint, I'll kind of pause here. We've got a lot of different experts that are going to be discussing our operations, the traffic. We are focused on sustainability related to this project. We have our climate pledge, to be reaching zero carbon across all of our operations by 2040. And we anticipate being operational with 100% renewable energy by 2025. We will be using science-backed and approach to drive innovation solutions to scale. We work with our suppliers to share our environmental goals, innovations, and reducing packaging to minimize waste. And we're looking to take bold actions from a sustainability standpoint in facilities just like the one under consideration to have innovative building systems and different design components as solar, for instance, and the ability to potentially bring that to a project here in Churchill. All of these things are items that we are considering as it relates to this project. And we're excited about the opportunity to potentially expand our operations in the region. Thank you.
Mr. Metz, did you have any further questions for Mr. Griggs?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll give Mr. Ferguson then. If he has any cross-examination, now would be the time for Mr. Griggs.
Thank you, Mr. Robb. Mr. Griggs, I wanted to make sure that I wrote down correctly the description of this facility. I believe you said it was a robotics sorted fulfillment center. Is that correct?
Sortable.
Sortable. Okay, thank you. Okay, and is it correct that there will be trucks which will deliver product to the facility from the airport or other shipping sources?
There will be suppliers sending product inbound to this location. At this time, where that inbound product sources would come from is to be determined. I can say I don't believe at this time there would be an intention to utilize the airport facility, but as our operations change in the future, that is a potential source for products coming to and from this site.
Thank you. So then once product arrives at the site, it would be checked into inventory and eventually depicted online as available product?
Correct.
Okay. And then a consumer would place an order. Is that correct?
Correct. Consumer, business, anyone who has access to Amazon.com to purchase goods.
Okay. And then through both robotics and employee labor, orders are then fulfilled and delivered to the customer from this facility. Is that correct?
This facility, should it move forward, would service our customers throughout North America.
Okay. And the types of vehicles that would take purchased or ordered product from this facility to the purchaser all throughout North America, would they be the typical Amazon panel vans that we have become very familiar with? They're not,
no, sir.
They're not tractor trailers, right?
No, sir. So from this facility, the way in which the network works, the vehicles that would be transporting product out of this building would be, predominantly line haul trucks that would head out into our network to stop at a variety of different locations along middle mile sites throughout North America, and then ultimately to a delivery station either with us or one of our third-party partners.
Okay, so they're not the, I guess, box vans. You actually would have tractor trailers leaving that would go to another facility and then delivered to the end user. Is that?
That is correct. Yes, the products leaving this site would be bundled in pallets with other products heading in the general vicinity of the end delivery source, be it a customer or business. They would not be the delivery vans out of this location.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I had for Mr. Griggs.
Are there any other party objectors who have questions for Mr. Griggs? I see, I can only see the first name, but it might be Dr. or Ms. Kasman. Alex, can you help me out there?
Right. Did I hear correctly that the facility will be 100% renewable energy in 2025?
our goal is that our network will be supported by 100% renewable energy by 2025. This facility itself would be part of that process, but that is through a variety of different methods to purchase renewable energy to source our buildings.
Right, but there's natural gas, 79 HVAC natural gas units being built on this site. Are they going to be replaced?
So the way and I will turn to our experts, but the process with which renewable energy, it also compensates for how our operations are used. So there is both renewable energy sources, the purchases of renewable energy that will be powering our entire network and providing potentially offsets to the operations of the building. So I'll turn it over to our experts to kind of dive into that more deeply, but that is part of our climate pledge commitment.
And Ms. Casman, we're only going to take one witness at a time, so it's certainly a question you can reserve to ask to a future representative of either Amazon or the developer in this case. Did you have any other questions, Ms. Casman?
No.
Okay, thank you. I see two more hands up, Alex.
Robin has had her, she can unmute. And then I see one of the panelists has their hands up, so I have to go.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Okay. Mr. Griggs, you paint a beautiful picture about the green campus that you're going to be building there, but that's kind of, doesn't that seem, what will you do about all the semi trucks that are going to be coming and going and all the diesel fumes that are going to be coming out? I mean, if you're planning on changing that in 2040, I might not be still alive by then. And I'm concerned because of the air, and we need to be able to breathe the air. Is there any plan, and I know these are all subcontractors and things, but surely you must be concerned about that. And that's all I had to ask.
I appreciate your sentiments, ma'am. We have experts that will discuss kind of the environmental considerations and what has been tested at the site. You know, we as a company are committed to the climate pledge and what we're able to achieve through innovation at our sites. And this building, should it move forward, would be a large part of our considerations in Churchill Borough, throughout the Pittsburgh region. And we are our focus as a company on making these promises come into existence.
Thank you.
Alex, are there any other individuals?
Yes, there's a hand raised in the Zoom room, and then I also have another attendee with their hand raised. So in the Zoom room, go ahead and unmute yourself and speak. I believe Ruthie wants to speak.
And if you could, I'm sorry, one more sort of housekeeping item just to make life a little easier on our court reporter. For those party objectors who are asking questions in this format, if you could please, before you ask your question, just state your name. Thank you very much.
Ruthie Ray, I wanted to ask if he could clarify how many trucks that Amazon can unload an hour at this site. How many trucks on estimate?
So that item, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to object that this was outside of the scope of the testimony. We will have a traffic expert momentarily who can speak to this in more detail.
And understanding that objection, Mr. Gallagher, I mean, it's perfectly appropriate if Mr. Griggs does not have that information to simply state as so, and then we can move on to another witness.
Yeah, Mr. Robb, my statement was going to be that our traffic expert will be detailing all of the operational movements from the traffic study that was submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Griggs.
Thank you. My other question is if he could describe the work conditions for the projected employees that would be working at this site. Could he describe a typical day for those workers?
So, I'm sorry, ma'am.
I was just wanting to know, since you were representing Amazon and are familiar with your operation, what would be a day in the life of a worker at this size of a distribution center? Or if you could outline, what are the types of jobs that would be in the site?
Correct. Okay, so there will be a mix of both entry level and team leader positions as well as managerial positions within the building. There will be multiple shifts throughout the day that our associates and managers will be working to provide the 24/7 operations at the building. Our associates, again, will be making industry-leading pay starting at $15 an hour with comprehensive benefits that start day one with full vision, health, dental, 401k matching, as well as parental leave. We want to help our associates with on-site training. They also go through upskilling. There's a variety of different safety trainings, ongoing coaching, and access to continuing education opportunities that our workforce will be involved with. The associates throughout their shift will be, loading and unloading supplies into the inventory chain. They'll be unloading and sorting supplies, moving them through the facility to be packaged. We will have associates that will be packaging product into boxes or envelopes to get them out. They'll be part of the labeling process. There'll be safety instructors. There'll be a variety of different workforce and business management. There's on-site security roles that'll be part of the process there and part of the operations moving forward. We are incredibly focused on the ability for our employees that want to upskill and be able to move forward. Amazon has invested over $700 million to provide upskilling for over 100,000 U.S. employees for in-demand jobs within our network. We are able to last year alone we helped to hire over 400,000 workers during the pandemic to help achieve balance and help provide that employment stabilization that so many needed during the crisis over the last year. One of the reasons that we're able to attract so many people to join Amazon is our number one priority is, a positive and safe working environment. We are committed to operational excellence here at Amazon, and we are committed to making it one of the most attractive or the most attractive place to work in the United States, at least according, to things like LinkedIn.
Folks, when the witness is testifying, if you could please make sure you keep yourself muted. And one of the things that you're going to learn throughout the course of this hearing, with due respect to everyone involved, is the witness is not always going to answer the question the way you want them to answer the question. So we want to continue to be respectful and accept the answer that's given and then move on to the next question. Ms. Ray, do you have another question?
No.
All right.
I would just add, last year alone, we committed $1 billion in employee safety with an additional $300 million for safety projects to create, things like technology to prevent collisions of forklifts and other industrial vehicles. We are developing a comprehensive program called Working Well to help reduce injuries and support our employees' overall well-being, whether at home or at work.
Alex, I see Ms. Fox, I think, is next on the hands list. You're muted, Alex.
Okay. Yes, the New York Times recently did a detailed story of the labor practices within Amazon warehouses, as I'm sure you're aware, and talked about the anti-union tactics, the hire to fire policies, and 150% turnover per year, which also allows wages to be kept low. I'm wondering what your reaction would be to an effort by employees to unionize if you came to Pittsburgh, to this location.
Mr. Gallagher, I assume that's an objection as to relevance. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
If I can just comment on that, I have sat here quietly while Mr. Griggs has told about their employment structure and employee benefits and so on, which really has nothing at all to do with the land use impact that this property will have. But, he has now placed the good nature, the benefits to the employees into this record, and I think it would be unfair to not allow him to be cross-examined on the very subject about which he has gone on about.
Thanks, Mr. Ferguson. And Mr. Gallagher, I certainly can appreciate your objection. If Mr. Griggs has an opinion on this matter, I think council can take it for what it's worth. I personally don't see how it relates to the conditional use criteria or any of the criteria in the zoning code. But if Mr. Griggs wants to respond to Ms. Fox's question, we'll let him go ahead and respond.
Sure, Mr. Robb. Just to, if she could restate the question just one more time, I'm happy to respond.
My question is, based on the policies that Amazon has used in terms of hire to fire, keeping wages low, anti-union tactics, would this facility welcome a union organizing effort?
Sure. The truth is that Amazon already offers what unions are requesting for employees. We offer industry-leading wages, comprehensive benefits from day one, opportunities for career growth, all while working in sort of a safe, modern, and inclusive work environment. At Amazon, these benefits and opportunities come with the job, as does the ability to communicate directly with leadership of the company and of the site. We believe direct dialogue is essential to our work environment. And we respect the rights of our employees to choose to join or not join a union.
Ms. Fox, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Sure. Alex, who's next on the list here? I don't think Mr. Saunders is a party objector. Am I correct there?
I do not believe so, but Jill is able. I believe she registered, so we'll have her unmute.
Hi, my question is actually very simple, and it kind of piggybacks on the last question. The benefits and the employee positions that you're creating, all well and good, but is that dependent upon you being at this location, or would that not be the same regardless of where in Allegheny County or Western Pennsylvania you would settle?
Correct. My statements apply to all of Amazon's operations.
So this conditional use that really doesn't impact this conditional use thing. This would be regardless of where you went.
Yes, it applies to all of Amazon's operations.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, do we have anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Ferguson still has his hand up, but there's also Elizabeth Kassman has her hand up as well.
Ms. Kassman has already asked questions. I think we'll at least get back to Mr. Ferguson first. And I would ask respectfully for everyone to keep in mind what the criteria are that are under discussion and at issue before Borough Council, so that we can continue moving on to the relevant items at this hearing. So Mr. Ferguson, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. It's not my intent to take more than one bite of the apple. I simply omitted this question. Mr. Griggs, how many other robotics sortable fulfillment centers are there in Pennsylvania?
I would need to get back to you, Mr. Ferguson. I would need to look up our list of current active facilities with that designation. But I will have that either this evening or at next council meeting.
Okay. Do you know roughly how many such facilities are in the United States?
Again, our operations are constantly expanding and being modified as far as the facility operations. I can get that current information updated and to you either later tonight or for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Alex, we don't want to make a practice of this, but because we did not explain sort of the one bite at the apple rule, if Dr. Kassman wants to ask an additional question, or Mr. Griggs, if she is still seeking to ask a question, I'm not sure if the hand's up intentionally or not.
Still up. I'd like to ask Mr. Griggs how 50% turnover rate is consistent with the concept of a good job.
Objection.
Yeah, Dr. Kasman, I'm not sure that question is either relevant or this individual is capable of answering that question. Mr. Griggs, it's up to you if you want to answer that question or not.
No, I'll move on.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Metz, Mr. Gallagher, any redirect for Mr. Griggs, or are we moving on?
We're moving on. That's all we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Griggs.
Thank you.
Mr. Slitzer, two quick things. If you wouldn't mind explaining for the group the one bite at the apple rule, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. I guess I could spell that out a little bit more. Due to, I think, concerns regarding efficiency and just fairness and keeping things moving along, frankly, we will, during the cross-examination portion, we're only going to give folks one opportunity to ask questions. Otherwise, I could foresee us really, being here all night just for each witness. So respectfully, and being respectful of everybody's time, you'll have one opportunity to cross-examine each witness with as many questions as you like to ask. But when you're done, that'll be the end of your opportunity for that particular witness.
Thank you. And Mr. Robb, the next witness that we're going to call is Chris Prisk from Langan Engineering, and he is going to testify about traffic. And so this is likely to take some time. And you mentioned having periodic recesses earlier, and I just wondered if this was an appropriate time for that, or if you want to go partway through Mr. Prisk's testimony and then do it.
Let me ask our court reporter how she's feeling right now off the record to see if maybe now is a good time for a break, or if she wants to plow through for a little bit more.
I'm fine.
You're fine?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Metz, I mean, we do have just so much ground to cover. I think let's just go ahead and get him started. Sure. I think I expect a some lengthy testimony from him. So let's just keep on going.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll introduce Mr. Prisk. So can you just state your name for the record, and then also go on to tell us about your kind of educational and professional qualifications?
Sure. My name is Chris Prisk. I'm a senior project manager with Langan Engineering. Graduated in 2001 from Geneva College with a bachelor's in civil engineering. I worked in upstate New York for just over 5 years and then relocated down here 2007. So I've been working in this area for 14 plus years. The group out of the Pittsburgh office that I kind of oversee, which geographically is kind of in charge of Ohio, West Virginia, Western PA. We now have 5 full-time staff.
Thank you. And so are you a professional engineer?
Yes, I'm originally licensed in New York State, and then through reciprocity licensed in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia. There were a few other states in there as we're pursuing work with other companies, but those are the current professional engineering license that I hold.
Thank you. And what kind of an engineer are you?
Traffic transportation engineer.
Okay, thanks. And so you mentioned that you started your career in upstate New York and then you moved to Pittsburgh. So what's the total length of time that you've been practicing as a traffic engineer?
I think I'm just over 20 at this point.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Chris. And if you could describe the traffic study, sort of starting with the scoping process and the different iterations that it's gone through, and just describe for council and the public the traffic study. And then I know we have some slides and a simulation to show also.
Okay, sure, we'll do. Well, we started this process back in November of 2019, which is kind of hard to believe at this point. And we are just over a year and a half before now we kind of officially can say that the traffic study has been approved by Churchill Borough and their consultants, as well as Allegheny County. And then PennDOT has kind of officially signed off on the traffic study, saying that all their comments have been addressed. They don't need to revisit it. Although I think they're still waiting to maybe potentially review some outside comments from the intervener. But in all intents and purposes from them, they've kind of signed off on the traffic study. So I guess kind of just to walk everyone through kind of where we've been, since it has been over a year and a half of this process. Initially, it starts out with a scoping meeting with the responsible parties involved. So in this case, PennDOT, Allegheny County, and Churchill Borough. And you basically run through the study assumptions, the study area intersections, where you anticipate the traffic coming from. And once you iron all that out and you have these study assumptions confirmed, then you actually move on to actually performing the analyses. And so this scoping process, we actually had 3 to 4 different preliminary submissions, responses back and forth, just for the scoping process itself. And so initially we proposed looking at a certain number of intersections, and then Churchill Borough requested that we add an additional intersection, and then PennDOT asked that we add an additional intersection. So the locations that we were tasked to look at has been thoroughly vetted. The amount of traffic that is anticipated for this facility has also been thoroughly vetted. Initially, we proposed to use information from the client. So we had some site-specific information, 24-hour schedule, if you will, of cars and trucks entering and exiting the facility. We provided that to PennDOT, Churchill Borough, and Allegheny County. Upon review, they didn't feel comfortable using the information that the client had provided us, that schedule. And they suggested that we use ITE methodology, which is your standard in the traffic engineering realm. There's a few different, basically what ITE is, Institute of Transportation Engineers, and it's the TripGen handbook is a collection of counts from various facilities. And people collect these counts, collect the data associated with these counts, and then compile them all together so you have a reference manual to determine how much traffic certain types of developments will generate based on variables such as employee headcount, square footage, things of that nature. Because this type of e-commerce facility is rather new, the amount of data in ITE is not as comprehensive as other land uses. And so initially we proposed a method of using ITE that generated more peak hour traffic volumes than what the client schedule we had. When I say peak hour traffic volumes, there's a window between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning, and then a window between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. in the evening. That's considered kind of your highest traffic volumes because it corresponds to commuter travel times. And so during those 2 time frames, the method that we proposed with ITE would generate more traffic than what our client schedule was showing, but we were agreeable with using that. After a few different back and forth iterations, the borough and PennDOT directed us to use a different method using ITE that generated even higher traffic volumes than our proposal, even higher traffic volumes than what the client schedule had indicated. And so at that point, the traffic volumes for employees and the traffic volumes for trucks were determined. And again, it was vetted by those 3 outside sources and their professional engineers that were reviewing our work. After that, we went through other things such as distribution. So where did we foresee vehicles coming and going from the facility? Where do we foresee trucks coming and going from the facility? Initially, we kind of did our standard procedure of looking at existing counts, looking at residential density population areas, looking at where we anticipate truck routing to be, and we proposed some distributions. Again, through that 2 to 3 kind of revision process, we ended up actually using the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, their modeling efforts to help us generate distributions. That was what was recommended to us. And so the distributions of employee vehicles and trucks, again, was vetted by all 3 agencies and approved to. prior to us starting our study. So that gives you a little background just on some of the preliminary submissions. So that was the back and forth before we even started the analyses. Then we submitted our initial traffic study submission, which contemplated a larger facility size at this location. And the recommendations that we came up identified a potential dual lane roundabout at William Penn and Beulah Road, and a new off-ramp connection from the Parkway to a local road, which then could service our site. Through a few different planning commission meetings, I know the comment had come up, couldn't there be a direct connection from the interstate to our site to and from? And so I just want to, for clarity's sakes, let you know that per FHWA guidelines, you can't have a private development connect directly to an interstate facility. So that's why it's critical that this modified off-ramp, if you will, connects to a local road, and then that local road can then service our site. That was the initial submission. Again, the mitigations in our initial submission adequately addressed any traffic impacts that we would be required to service. Comments came back on the first submission with some various analyses, technical things within the analyses, additional improvements that the agencies would like to see. So we refined our improvements. We went back with another submission. I believe after the second or third submission, the issues no longer were technically in the study did our improvements address the impacts. It was more on the design level, can those mitigations be constructed? And so, can we actually construct this dual lane roundabout and have it function as the analyses are showing? Can we construct some of these other improvements and have them function as the analyses were showing? And so it became a detailed effort of working through design steps, getting additional survey, doing additional design, which isn't typical in your traffic study. Typically, traffic study kind of stays very high level conceptual. You're going to install a signal, you're going to install some lanes, a driveway. The amount of detail with these design concepts that were being requested is just out of the ordinary. So I just want to state that, again, further vetting to make sure that the mitigation that was being proposed could actually be constructed and function as designed. So we resubmitted again. This third submission, at that point, the size of the facility had been reduced. So the amount of traffic generated based on the procedures set forth from the review agencies lessened the amount of peak hour trips by just over about 100. At that point, due to some raised concerns with the roundabout, the dual lane roundabout was kind of dismissed, and more conventional lane widening at the signalized intersection at William Penn and Beulah was pursued. Some other improvements, additional sketches that were provided. And then we had another submission after that as well. And again, it was, improvements were addressed within our study, and with these additional design concepts were illustrated that they were addressed. And then we, provided additional improvements that were being recommended by the borough or by PennDOT. And I think I'm going to start to walk through some of those improvements next. Actually, one more comment before we share the screen and start to walk through some of those improvements is there was a comment that was mentioned. We collected all our intersection counts, which are used as the baseline for our study prior to the COVID kind of pandemic. And based on information that PennDOT has provided, traffic volumes are still lower than pre-pandemic traffic volumes. And so what that means for our study is that our study has higher traffic volumes than if you would go out and recount today and start over. So again, higher existing volumes than what's currently there now, higher trip generation than what our client says. You know, our study is very, very conservative. And so the numbers and the volumes that you see in the public report that's documented is higher than what we anticipate actually occurring. So with that, if you want to go to some of the improvements.
Chris, let me just ask you one question to clarify. So the assumptions that are in your traffic study about the number of trucks and the number of cars that will be traveling to and from the site every day, do those trip assumptions, do they come from data provided by Amazon?
No.
And do they come from any data provided by Hillwood, the developer?
No.
Okay, can you just for total clarity, can you state one more time where the assumptions about the number of truck and car trips come from?
The number of truck and car trips that we were directed to use is based on a methodology that was provided to us from the Churchill Boroughs engineer and agreed upon by PennDOT. It's a application of ITE data. Unfortunately, again, that ITE data is a little bit limited, and it's a different application than what we would have suggested.
Okay, so just to be totally clear, the assumptions about the number of car and truck trips, that is based on the ITE manual data for some species of distribution center as agreed by PennDOT and the borough and the county. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sure. The first item to touch on is you can see the existing exit 79A off-ramp to Greensburg Pike. And what's currently proposed is a modification to that so that you can come off the off-ramp and then hit a T intersection. And from that T intersection, which is a local road, you can then turn left to head towards Beulah Road and access site driveways, or you could turn right to head towards Greensburg Pike.
Mr. Prisk, I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting, Mr. Metz, but could you clarify for the record which exhibit, which page we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is, I was just about to do it. This is exhibit 29. And the page is 932.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, this is the court reporter. Was that Mr. Gallagher speaking or Mr. Metz?
It was Mr. Gallagher.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. So you come off this new off-ramp, which connects directly to the local road. You can turn left, travel towards Beulah, and then turn off this new local road connection to access the site. Or when you hit the T at the local road, you turn right to head towards Greensburg Pike. Some of the details of that new off-ramp connection will still be thoroughly vetted kind of during the design HOP process with PennDOT and the borough and Allegheny County. But in concept, that connection has been approved. And again, just to specify, it has to connect to that local road piece. If you want to go to the...
Let me ask you just a couple of questions about,
yeah,
that, about that slip ramp. Mr. Prisk, if we can go back to that drawing. Right here. Thank you. So during Planning Commission, a couple of questions were raised about this that I just thought it would be helpful for Borough Council to hear about. There was some confusion about whether cars would be traveling kind of back up north on this slip ramp to get on to 376 here. And can you discuss that?
Yes, thank you, Lafe. This is just still a direct connection off. So it's exiting the parkway. And you can exit and either go directly to Greensburg Pike, or you can hit that T intersection and turn left. You cannot enter the parkway from this, and you cannot travel from Greensburg Pike through on this local road connection to Beulah Road.
And so if you are exiting the parkway at the Greensburg Pike exit, and what you want to do is not go into the site, but to go out to Greensburg Pike, how do you do that?
It appears that they want to keep something similar to the kind of free flow configuration of staying to the right and you'd hit the traffic light at Greensburg Pike, but perhaps also have an option when you connect to this T road to turn right and do that as well. So there appears there might be two options to then connect back to Greensburg Pike because there's 2 lanes on that approach with the signal.
Thank you. So one of the options that you'll have will still be to do it just like you do it today, driving off of the ramp over to Greensburg Pike.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Thank you. And just to clarify, is it possible from Greensburg Pike to turn into the site at this location or not?
No. The connection at Greensburg Pike is one way heading towards Greensburg Pike.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you'd like to go. This area is the Beulah corridor.
Just identify the page number.
Okay. 933. So page 933 is what we're referring to now. And it shows an existing aerial of the Beulah corridor from McCready through William Penn to Churchill and the existing site access. And this was kind of the main area of focus for the Churchill Borough. And so we went back and forth on the various improvements and how that would look and turn out. So this kind of gives you context as to those 3 intersections existing. And then if you want to go to the next slide, this shows the proposed, and this is page 934. And so the improvements to highlight are McCready Road and Beulah. There's currently a flashing traffic signal. That would become fully signalized intersection, and it would be coordinated with the signal at William Penn and with Churchill. So that was kind of in response to residents' concern about exiting McCready. And then
what does that mean, a fully signalized intersection? How is that different from what's there today?
What's there today is just flashing kind of a warning of an intersection, whereas you're going to have your standard red, yellow, and green for both approaches. So, Beulah Road will have a red signal indication, and McCready will have a green, which will allow McCready to enter onto Beulah protected. And then likewise, McCready will have a standard red and Beulah will have a green. And so Beulah will be able to travel protected. So that'll provide control for McCready Road to be able to exit.
Thank you.
On the west side, in between McCready and William Penn, you can see highlighted there a proposed section of sidewalk. Again, this was something that was raised during one of our previous meetings about making a better pedestrian connection or providing one that didn't exist currently to that transit bus stop. So we're highlighting there that these improvements will also include adding that sidewalk connection on the west side. What's not shown in the rest of the graphic is other existing sidewalks which will remain in place or relocated as needed, but still provide the same level of access. At the intersection of William Penn and Beulah, we're proposing an additional eastbound right turn lane, an additional northbound right turn lane, although it's limited in size, and an additional westbound left turn lane so that there's 2 westbound left turn lanes from the Parkway off-ramp to Beulah heading south. As you continue south under the interstate, there's additional widening on that southbound approach so that there's 2 through lanes, a dedicated left turn lane, and then a dedicated right turn lane. And also you'll notice that the intersection has been shifted approximately 80 feet south. And what that addresses is there was some queuing concerns in between those two existing signals under existing conditions. And so the borough wanted to see that intersection kind of shifted to increase the storage in between those two signals. What it also accomplished by shifting was eliminating the westbound right turn free flow movement to head north on Beulah, and it brought that into the signal. And then you can see some additional widening as you continue south to receive those 2 lanes south, and then it tapers back into the existing condition.
I'm sorry, Chris, for that last point, can you just reorient everyone of where you are on the map here? You want to use.
Yeah, let me see if, are you guys able to see the cursor? And we don't have our video screen up, so if someone could audibly tell me if they can see the cursor. Thank you.
Yes, we can see it.
So these 2 through lanes now continue through the intersection, and there's 2 through lanes that eventually neck back down. So there's widening here, and then there's widening here, and then this intersection itself is shifted about 80 feet. You can kind of see where the previous intersection aligned by this darker green area. So the original alignment kind of came like this, and now the proposed alignment is shifted south. And these improvements were vetted back and forth with the borough's engineer and PennDOT in the county, and this is what was determined to be the appropriate level of mitigation. Go to the next slide. Sorry. Now I'm looking at page 935, and this is just a zoomed in view of McCready and William Penn existing conditions. And then when you go to the next slide, you'll see a zoomed in of the proposed. So this is page 936.
Okay. Can you slowly walk us around this intersection again too with the cursor?
Sure. All right, so here's McCready, and here is the new traffic signal that would control all 3 approaches. Here is that new sidewalk that I mentioned that's on the western side, connecting, the southwest portion coming on Beulah to get to the bus stop. Here is the new eastbound right turn lane that's proposed. Here's the new exclusive northbound right turn lane that's proposed. Here's the new westbound left turn lane that's proposed, so that there's 2 left turn lanes as you travel south on Beulah. If you want to go to the next slide. Now I'm on page 937, and what we're speaking to is the road diet on Greensburg Pike. So we start from Graham Boulevard, and there's currently 4 lanes on Greensburg Pike, 2 in each direction. And what the road diet does is it repurposes the lane width that you have and traditionally reduces the amount of vehicular travel lanes to promote another type of use and/or to provide left turn lanes in both directions. And so you can see on this schematic, which is flipped from actual north, so heading left to right, coming from Graham Boulevard, we start to have a 2-way left turn lane heading south. You can utilize it heading north to turn left into some of those residences. And then by the time you hit the existing off-ramp 376, that signal, there's one travel lane in each direction and a turn lane, either a two-way left turn lane for both directions or exclusive turn lane. I'll go to the next one. As you head further south, you can see the school driveway. There's a shared two-way left turn lane north of that, an exclusive northbound left turn lane into the school, and then an exclusive southbound left turn lane into our proposed driveway. And then our proposed driveway is going to have a new traffic signal, which is going to control all three approaches. And then the road diet restriping continues further south of our proposed driveway. I want to go to the next one.
Hey, Chris, before you leave that one, could you just touch on the realignment of the site driveway on Greensburg Pike? You can see that the proposed driveway is shifted a bit to the north.
Yes, the existing driveway is currently a little bit further south of where our proposed driveway is coming in. And so we're shifting just a little bit north. We're kind of coming in at a standard, more typical kind of 90-degree connection to the new proposed signal.
And so there's a house just to the south of that intersection. Can you talk about its driveway? Just to the south, on the southern side of the site driveway, there's a home that has a whose driveway connects to the site driveway. And so right where your cursor is, you can see, can you talk about that, please?
So there was access to one of these residents off the previous driveway. And so we're going to maintain that access for them off the new driveway. So this would be the new connection to that residential home.
Thank
you. That's the next one. Mm-hmm. All right, this is page 939. You can see the road diet continues with one lane each direction, a two-way left turn lane in the middle. And then the limits that we had kind of proposed terminate within Churchill Borough. However, at Allegheny County's discretion, they're perhaps interested in continuing that road diet portion. But what we've illustrated conceptually was just within Churchill Borough limits. Next, I'm shifting to William Penn Highway. And so on the left here is Graham Boulevard. And then on the right is the existing on-ramp to Parkway. We have been requested to upgrade the signal phasing at William Penn and Graham Boulevard so that there's a northbound right turn that's protected while there's a westbound left turn. And then instead of a road diet where you lose a vehicular travel lane, this is more of a restriping effort along William Penn. So under the existing condition, left turn lane warrants were satisfied on this state route. Under our proposed condition, PennDOT requested that we restripe the existing lanes to provide those exclusive left turns onto the Parkway, as well as an exclusive left turn onto Old Gate Road. So we didn't lose a vehicular travel lane, but we restriped it for a different purpose. And then on page 941, we continue east, and you can see that restriping effort kind of tailors back before you hit Northern Pike intersection, and then it goes back to the 2 and 2 lanes. And then I have 2 different traffic simulations to show, and I think I need Sean to help cue those up for me.
Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Metz, I wonder if now would be a good opportunity to take that short break since we're really close to 8 o'clock before we start the simulations. Does that make sense?
That sounds good.
Court reporter, Kim, will you agree with that? Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great, Kim. How much time do you need? 5, 10 minutes? What do you need? 5 minutes.
5's fine.
Okay.
Thank
See
you.
everybody. See everybody in 5. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have. You're not mute. You guys have
All right, our court reporter is ready to rock. So whenever the applicant and your witnesses are ready, we can jump back in.
Thank you, Mr. Robb. We are here and we're ready, and I think Mr. Prisk is going to show his traffic simulations. All right, ready? Let's just refer to which exhibit.
Yeah, this, I'm sorry, this is exhibit 31.
Ready? Yep. Okay, so this simulation takes the approved traffic volumes from our study during the PM peak hour, and we're just going to pan around through the various intersections to show you in real time what the conditions would look like. So this is the off ramp to Churchill, unsignalized control. And the whole video in its entirety is maybe 3 minutes, but we wanted to show you kind of each intersection to give you a feel for it. Again, this is 1 hour during the PM peak hour. This is now Churchill and Beulah, as well as our site driveway. So the new intersection that's shifted south, you can kind of see in the background the Google image of where the existing alignment would be. So shifted south, the widening that we discussed earlier, and a brand new signal here. And then this is William Penn in Beulah. The different colors that are represented on the vehicles are their turning movements downstream. So if they're going to turn left at the next intersection or turn right, that's what the different colors mean. And you can see the McCready intersection signalized, as well as the connection coordinated signalized operations with William Penn.
Chris, right now in this view, we're not seeing any trucks. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, you know, again, right now, if you can look right there, you see a blue truck and a yellow truck kind of heading east off the page. So the amount of trucks that you actually see in the simulation is an accurate representation of what occurs during this peak hour, which should be the highest amount of traffic during the day. And so you're predominantly seeing employee traffic because that's predominantly what this facility generates. The amount of truck traffic during the hour is, I believe, maybe about 5% of what the employee traffic is. Again, you can see a white truck there that's heading east on William Penn. This is the intersection with Graham where we made those signal phasing improvements. So the northbound right turn can occur with the westbound left turn movement. See another truck heading southbound there on Graham. And then we continue further on William Penn to where it connects with Greensburg Pike, unsignalized intersection. And then we're going to start to pan south on Greensburg Pike to where that connects with Graham. And these intersections that are highlighted are all the study area intersections that were predetermined during that scoping process that I spoke to. So you can see two tractor trailers there and another truck north and south on Graham. And at this point, south on Greensburg Pike is where the road diet improvement would start. So you see 1 lane southbound, 2 lanes northbound there, but as you go to the signal with the parkway, it'll transition into 1 lane each direction with a center turn lane. There's another truck heading northbound on Graham. So then here would be the signalized intersection of the off-ramp with Greensburg Pike. And you can see the road diet at this point is in effect with 1 lane each direction, center turn lane, exclusive northbound left turn lane onto Marbury. And then we're going to continue south on Greensburg Pike to the site driveway, which will be next. So here's the intersection with the proposed site driveway. There's going to be 2 lanes exiting the proposed driveway. It's going to be a new signal that controls all 3 approaches. It'll have an exclusive southbound left turn lane. And you can see a truck there and a truck heading southbound. You can also kind of see in the background again the previous driveway, which is a little bit grayed. And that should wrap up. And again, that should illustrate the highest traffic volumes during that PM peak hour. And then the next simulation is Exhibit 30. And this is going to kind of illustrate those off-peak hours, if you will, but represent more of the typical conditions throughout the day. So, 10, 11 a.m., 1, 2, 3 p.m., those hours, which we're estimating is approximately 60% of that PM peak time. So again, this is the off-ramp with Churchill. The new proposed signalized access, which is shifted south. And again, this is using the approved traffic volumes for cars and trucks that we were directed to use, simulation in real time. This is William Penn and Beulah. And there's a truck turning eastbound right there. And if there's existing trucks that were in our counts, those are modeled as well. So not all trucks that are illustrated are associated with this development. And as we pan west on William Penn, here's the unsignalized intersection to get back on the parkway to head inbound. This is where there's the restriping. So same number of travel lanes, but just restriped to serve different purposes. So there's an exclusive westbound left turn lane and an exclusive eastbound left turn lane. And again, these are needs that were identified prior to our development. But the developer was agreeable to installing them. Here's the intersection with Graham Boulevard, where we're changing the phasing to have a northbound right and a westbound left overlap. And we're going to continue west on William Penn to Greensburg Pike, unsignalized. And in this off-peak model, you can see that there's very little queuing or congestion that's being anticipated. And again, we're going to continue to pan south on Greensburg Pike to where it connects with Graham. And this is kind of the start of that road diet on Greensburg Pike. keeps the existing configuration of the 2 lanes northbound, but southbound, it's only 1 vehicular travel lane and then a shared 2-way left turn. And there's a truck heading northbound on Graham. Then we're going to continue to pan south to the traffic signal with the Parkway off-ramp. And you can kind of see that new T intersection to the local road. Then you turn right to head to the off-ramp. You turn left on the local road towards Beulah to then access our site. This is where you can see the road diet in effect, where there's 1 travel lane northbound and southbound, and then the exclusive northbound left to Marbury. And then our last stop would be our proposed site driveway, which is signalized and a little bit north of the previous access. And you can see it has an exclusive southbound left turn, and then a single lane northbound, southbound, and then the 2 lanes exiting our site. And again, the traffic volumes during this kind of most of the day scenario, if you will, are very light. And I think that concludes the simulation.
Thank you, Chris. So going back to the language of the borough's zoning ordinance and the requirement regarding traffic. So the ordinance requires the applicant to provide a traffic study establishing that the traffic generated at the site will not have a material negative impact on the neighborhood. So in your professional opinion, will the traffic generated from this site, subject to the mitigations that we've proposed, will the site traffic have a material negative impact on the neighborhood?
Yeah, our professional opinion is that it will not.
Thank you very much. We have no further questions at this time for Mr. Prisk on the traffic study. Mr. Robb, although we will call him again to discuss the parking study.
Thanks, Mr. Metz. Unless there are questions from council, I think we can move on to Mr. Ferguson. We'll give him first crack at cross-examination unless he needs additional time to prepare.
I'm ready, thank you.
All right, go ahead. Thanks.
Mr. Prisk, I first want to start with your statement that PennDOT has signed off on your traffic study. I'll direct your attention to your Exhibit 24. And just let me know when you're there.
Yep, I have it.
Okay, thank you. So this is I believe it's a 5-page document. So if we begin on the second page, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different headings on a letter on which they signed off on the traffic study. And isn't it correct to say that under these 13 different headings, so I'll just give some representative examples for those who are listening. The transportation impact assessment, plan presentation, site distances, roadway geometrics, left turn lanes, right turn deceleration lanes, and so on. Doesn't PennDOT ask you to make I haven't counted them, but there's probably 50 or 60 either changes or provided additional information in connection with your last traffic impact study submission. If you responded, I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
No, I'm just going to read the first page. So page 891.
Well, you can do that if your attorney asks you to read the first page, but I'm asking you, aren't there 4 pages of additional information requested, additional corrections that need to be made, and so on?
No, I'd like to personally read page 891 as a response to your question. So PennDOT has completed its review of the transportation impact study for the project noted above. This concludes the department's review of the TIS. Our previous TIS comments have been addressed, as well as those of Churchill Borough. Prior to our approval, please provide documentation of the interviewer's response, as well as Allegheny County's response to Cycle 9 submission, which they've subsequently indicated their approval. Our new comments, which is what you're referring to, which will not affect the outcome of the TIS, are attached. So those comments are in reference to the design next steps. So, okay. So I think that kind of clearly answers.
Okay. So as you read, it says prior to our approval. So you don't have approval, you just have the end of comments on the last submission.
I interpret this as they're done with the TIS. They provided comments design-wise when we move on to the next step.
It says prior to approval. So you don't have approval now. Is that right?
I think that's why I use the term sign off.
Okay, so there's a difference for you in your mind between a sign off and an approval.
Because their letter states that they would like the intervener's response prior to approval, that's why I didn't say that we have official approval, but their letter indicates that they're done with the TIS review and everything's been addressed satisfactorily.
Even though they then provided you with at least 4 pages of comments.
The comments are in reference to the next step for design. So there's going to be more pages than that when we get through design. So the traffic study is done, but the design piece is yet to come.
Okay, so there's still plenty of work to do before you can get PennDOT's final approval.
It looks like we just have to provide documentation of the intervener's response, and then they'll provide approval.
Approval of what?
The TIS.
Okay, and then when do you intend to make all these 4 pages of comments with regard to what you referred to as final design?
Once we receive approval and we start to move forward with design plans, we'll prepare a large package and address those comments and start the design process.
Okay. Now, in your report, I'll get to it in detail, but you described, not quoting from the report, but that you had received what your report calls on page 8, client-specific traffic data projections for this end user. And then you talked about that. You described that in your testimony just now as a 24-hour schedule of cars and trucks entering the facility. Is that an accurate description? Is that the same as the client-specific traffic data projections for this end user that you refer to on page 8 of your report? It's the second full paragraph in the middle, begins with, based on the client-specific traffic data projections for this end user.
Page 100.
Oh,
of the
yes, that's
appendix,
page
and then-
100 of the entire binder of documents, yes.
Yeah, so initially we provided our schedule to, PennDOT, Churchill, Borough, and Allegheny County. We believe that to be the most accurate way to estimate traffic for this facility and its impacts. And so our study alludes to providing a comparison of what we think is the accurate number to the methodology that was instructed of us to use.
Okay, so when you testified in response to Mr. Lafe's question, Mr. Metz's question, I'm sorry, that there was a 24-hour schedule of cars and trucks entering the facility, was that something that Langan prepared?
No, that's information that's provided to us from the end user.
Can we just call the end user Amazon?
Yeah, I think I'm just kind of used to not sharing their name publicly.
Okay, take the cat's out of the bag. So, so when you testified just now about this 24-hour schedule of cars and trucks entering the facility, are you referring to the same thing on page 100 when you refer to client-specific traffic data projections for this end user?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you mean by a schedule of cars and trucks entering the facility? Is that something that you couldn't have counted it because the facility doesn't currently exist, right?
They provide a schedule of what they anticipate the number of employee vehicles and trucks based on employee headcount for the facility and operations that's required to kind of service it for trucks.
So it's a client's educated projection of the number of cars and trucks that would be using this facility based on whatever their internal information is at the time. Is that right?
It's information provided by the client.
Okay, thank you. And you said that PennDOT didn't feel comfortable using the client information. Does that correctly reflect what your testimony was?
Yeah, both Churchill Borough and PennDOT did not want to use the client provided schedule.
Okay. And what is your view as to whether or not the client provided schedule was likely to be more or less accurate than the ITE manual for this use?
Our professional opinion is that the client has a robust understanding of their operations. And so I would prefer to use the schedule they provide. However, in certain instances where the reviewing jurisdictions don't feel comfortable using the schedule, we have used ITE in the past, and that's why we put forth our methodology on how to use ITE that would provide more conservative traffic volumes, which usually shows our good faith effort, but it's still somewhat comparable to what we believe is the traffic schedule.
Okay, we'll come back to that when we go through the report. Now, you have not done a current traffic study of current traffic volumes, have you? By current, I mean, let's say this year.
You mean turning movement counts of the intersections?
No, traffic volumes at these intersections.
If we have not performed
traffic volumes. Do you have any current information about current traffic volumes at the relevant intersections that you studied?
We have not conducted counts this year at the intersections.
When was the last time you conducted counts at the intersections?
It was prior to COVID pandemic in 2020.
Okay, so it must have been before March of 2020.
Yes.
Okay, and you testified that those counts which you did in prior to March of 2020 are still higher than current traffic volumes, and from that you testified that this makes your study very conservative. And I'm asking you, if you haven't actually done any counts since before March of 2020, how could you possibly know whether the traffic counts today are higher or not?
PennDOT has been tracking traffic volumes across their roadways and interstates, and they have a graphic that they've kind of updated to share amongst the traffic engineering community. And their tracking has indicated that volumes, I think, are 85% of what they used to be. So their metrics indicate that volumes are still lower. And then anecdotally, I know from our personal office, the amount of traffic that our office once generated pre-pandemic is significantly less than what it generates now.
Okay, but you'll acknowledge that the 85% is likely to still be attributed to the working economy continuing to emerge slowly out of pandemic conditions? Or do you think that the current emergence from pandemic conditions is completely irrelevant to PennDOT's estimate of an 85% traffic volume at this time?
I think their metrics indicate that traffic volumes are less than when we counted. And so logically, that means our study is conservative because it has higher volumes.
Well, that's the question you wanted to answer. Now I want you to answer my question. Do you attribute the lower traffic volumes now in any way at all to our slow emergence from a pandemic? Or do you think that the traffic volumes we're seeing today are likely to be permanent?
You know, I don't think I can speak to national trends.
No, not national, local.
My personal opinion is, you know, we have an office of 50 people in Pittsburgh. We used to have 50 people drive in and leave every day pre-pandemic. Now we have 20. Okay. And our company has embraced the hybrid work from home. So I believe that the residential to office trip is going to be less than what it once was, and I'm not sure that'll ever come back.
Okay, so you don't really know. So I mean, so we don't really know now because we don't have a full green light out of the pandemic. I mean, that's why we're meeting virtually tonight, among other reasons, I suppose. So you really don't know, based upon this immediate post-pandemic conditions, as to whether or not that would be a basis for asserting, as you have in tonight's hearing, that your study done prior to March of 2020 is very conservative based upon what's happening today in July of 2021.
Was there a question in there? I'm sorry.
Yes. Would you like it to be read back?
Please, if you could.
Kim, would you do that for us, please?
Question. Okay, so you don't really know. So, I mean, we don't really know now because we don't have a full green light out of the pandemic. I mean, that's why we're meeting virtually tonight, amongst other reasons, I suppose. So you really don't know, based upon this immediate post-pandemic conditions, whether or not that would be a basis for asserting, as you have in tonight's hearing, that your study done in prior to March of 2020 is very conservative based upon what's happening today in July of 2021.
Do you understand the question?
I would respond with, getting a little echo.
I couldn't hear what anybody say.
Yeah, I think someone needs to be muted.
Oh.
I would respond with, PennDOT provided guidance when the pandemic occurred as to what traffic volumes could be used for a study. And the typical window for traffic volumes, intersection counts is 3 years. And so we conducted those counts pre-pandemic. It's obviously a year and a half from that. So if the counts were conducted during the pandemic, there's some adjustments that maybe PennDOT would require, but because they were the volumes were considered good for the study. So they've approved the volumes.
Okay, we'll go with that. Is it necessary for to acquire additional right-of-way for any of the traffic improvements that you've shown us this evening?
Yes.
Okay. Could you walk us through the areas where it is necessary to acquire additional right-of-way?
I'm not sure I could speak to all of them.
Can you speak to any of them? Because your answer was yes.
The intersection of William Penn and Beulah, the intersection of Beulah and Churchill. I know those two areas definitely would have right-of-way impacts.
Okay. So Beulah, is Beulah a borough road, a county road, state road?
I believe it's a state road to Churchill and then maybe a borough road south of Churchill. I'm not 100%.
Sure. Don't know who owns the roads?
Don't have that on the tip of my tongue right now, but we've investigated that for our study.
Do you know how much, you say you did not investigate it for your studies?
No, I said we did.
You did, okay. So do you have any idea how much additional, are you talking about additional width of right-of-way?
Yeah, I think there's some areas that we're going to require PennDOT right-of-way, and then other areas will require borough right-of-way.
Okay. How does Hillwood expect to acquire that right-of-way?
I don't think I'm the right person to speak to the right-of-way process.
Well, when you design traffic improvements, isn't it of interest to know whether or not your improvements are actually on land on which the improvements can be made?
Yes, and that we started that with our detailed design sketches, because that was a question that the borough and PennDOT were interested in, what kind of right-of-way impacts there would be.
Okay, and so you can tell council tonight that you, off the top of your head, first of all, you don't know how much additional land you would have to acquire, and you don't know whether you will be able to acquire that right of way. Is that correct? If you responded, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Final understanding of how much right-of-way would be needed is going to be part of the design process.
Okay. But if you can't acquire the right of way, then you can't make the improvements. And then you can't say that your mitigation recommendations would or would not end up being detrimental to the community. So
I believe part of the extra.
Sorry. So your opinion then is conditioned upon the acquisition of a number of rights of way of which you are not currently familiar.
I believe the purpose of those additional detailed design drawings that the borough and PennDOT requested was to understand what potentially those right-of-way impacts, if any, would be.
Okay.
And so by their reviewing of that design plan and what those potential right-of-ways impacts would be, I'm taking that they're going to be acceptable with that moving forward.
Okay, so once you've identified additional right-of-way that needs to be acquired, and let's assume it's acceptable to the borough, what's the process then of acquiring that right-of-way?
There's an additional group within my firm that would kind of spearhead the bulk of this design process. Sometimes the right-of-way procedures are taken on behalf of the DOT or by the borough, or the developer is kind of asked to lead that, but I'm not really the best person to speak to that process.
Okay, and can you identify the best person to speak to that process?
Someone within our design group.
Okay, can you be any more specific than that? Because they might be testifying and we'd want to ask them that question.
He answered the question.
Well, he said someone within our design group. I asked if there's anything more specific that he can tell us, and he didn't say yes or no.
You don't know, just say, well, I believe it would probably be Anne Marie Vigilante,
Okay.
but she's not scheduled to testify.
Okay. All right. Now, just to be clear, when we talk about the necessity of acquiring additional right-of-way, I'm speaking not only for transportation right-of-way, but for stormwater drainage to get water from the proposed improvement to a presumably a Sean, I can see you're saying things to him, and I'd ask that if you want to ask him questions, that it be done on the record and in public. I'm really uncomfortable with seeing non-public communications between legal counsel and the witness happening. So I'm talking about not only stormwater drainage, but the sidewalks, which you've shown, signage, signalization, and utilities. So does that help to refresh your understanding as to whether or not, in addition to transportation right-of-way, you might need right-of-way to be acquired for any of those other purposes?
Object, this is outside the scope of his testimony. He testified to a traffic study.
Mr. Ferguson, I think he has covered this issue. I think you made your point. He's not a stormwater engineer or any of the other items you just asked him about.
Okay, I'll move on. So I'm referring now to Exhibit 29, and this image appears on both pages 934 and 936. Just let me know when you've got to that image.
Exhibit 29. What page did you say? 934.
Okay, I'm here.
There. So when you walked us through this image, you identified this new sidewalk, and you see the cross-hatched areas within the roads. The roads are not identified there. So could you tell us what is the intersection? Actually, it's intersections in the plural to which this new sidewalk leads.
The proposed sidewalk that we highlighted in this figure is on the western side of Beulah, and it connects from William Penn to McCready. The purpose is to provide a connection to the transit, which currently doesn't exist, the sidewalk to the transit.
When you say transit, do you mean bus service, or what
Yes.
form of transit are you referring to?
Port Authority bus.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I want to refer back to Mr. Griggs' testimony, and at least one of the functions of this site will be that trucks with inventory that have been ordered from customers will be loaded onto, I think the term you're using is line trucks. I think Mr. Griggs used the term line trucks, and then delivered to a distribution facility from which they will be delivered from there. So the drivers of these trucks, which will leave the proposed facility and go to, I guess, more granular distribution facilities. First of all, would those trucks be parked on the site, and would the driver of that truck, as an employee, drive their personal car to the site and then get into that truck and drive that truck off the site to its next destination? What I'm really getting at is the delivery trucks which leave this facility, will the drivers of those trucks be driving their personal vehicles to the site, parking them, and then driving the trucks off the site for their workday?
My understanding is that a truck driver will enter the facility with a trailer, drop that off, connect up to a different trailer, and then leave the facility. So they won't be arriving with a personal vehicle.
Okay. Are any of the trucks fueled on the site?
I think our site civil engineer could speak to that better than me.
And that is?
Chris Westbrook.
Okay, thank you. Is there maintenance of the trucks on the site?
Again, a better question for Chris Westbrook.
Okay. So do any of these truck drivers, do you know whether or not they would be coming to the site, dropping off a trailer, presume, picking up a newly loaded trailer, leaving the site? Would a driver do that more than once a day? That is, the same driver with the same tractor?
I wouldn't know that.
Okay. All right, I want to direct your attention to your study now. And so I'm starting on page 93, which is page 1 of the study.
Okay.
So the first line says, Langan has prepared the following transportation impact study in support of the proposed Churchill sort project. I presume you mean what you say. It isn't for the project. Is this actually an advocacy document? Did you prepare this knowing that it was to be in support of the facility?
We were tasked with fulfilling a requirement for a traffic study. And so that's what this document is.
Okay. Now, in the next section, site trip generation and distribution, you identify that the land use code, which you relied upon, is 155 High Cube Fulfillment Center Warehouse, non-sort. Is that right?
That's the code that the borough and PennDOT requested us to use.
Okay, so historically, that's what you were required to use, and that's what you did use, right?
I wouldn't say historically. In this case, that's what they required us to use.
Okay, fair enough. So then in that same section, the next paragraph, it says, this is really I'm reading from an executive summary, and then you go into the explanation later, but it says the resulting trip generation calculations indicate that the proposed site would generate 636 AM peak hour generator trips and 780 PM peak hour generator trips. Isn't it your testimony, though, that this facility being a 24/7 operation, the facility doesn't really operate in peak hours? You're just making a statement about the impact of this facility on peak hours outside of the facility. Is that fair to say?
There's actually two distinctions. So there's the peak hour of adjacent street traffic, which is that window of 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., which is traditionally when you have the highest traffic volumes on the roadway network due to commuting, which I mentioned. There's the peak hour of generator, which is when the facility generates the highest amount of traffic. And when it's identified as such, it's typically a different time than the peak hour of adjacent street traffic. So based on information provided by the client, we know that their facility actually generates higher traffic earlier than the AM peak hour of adjacent street and a little bit later than the PM peak hour of adjacent street. And so by the reviewing agencies asking us to take the peak hour of generator traffic and apply it on top of the peak hour of adjacent street traffic, that's yet another example of how this study is more conservative than it needs to be, because you're taking a higher case that doesn't occur during that time frame and you're applying it to an adjacent street time frame.
Okay, so this executive summary, this conclusion that you're announcing in the executive summary here, that is using the ITE manual and the Land Use Code 155. Is that right?
Yes, that's what we were directed to use.
Okay. Now, how many operating Amazon sort facilities, I'll call it a sort facility instead of calling it a robotic sortable fulfillment center. Do you know how many such facilities there are in the United States?
I do not.
Okay. Do you think that'd be a valuable source of information against which to corroborate the conclusions reached by using the ITE manual?
Because we were directed to use ITE, I'm not sure why the number of existing facilities would apply to that.
Well, I wasn't part of that process, but you testified that you actually presented the 24-hour schedule of cars and trucks entering the facility to PennDOT, but they didn't feel comfortable with it. So isn't it possible that had you known how many similar facilities there were in the United States and were able to support actual data from those facilities, maybe PennDOT might have been comfortable with it or found it to be a more reliable basis upon which to calculate traffic volumes than the ITE manual?
We have an objection calling for irrelevant, just relevance hypothetical.
I mean, Mr. Gallagher, I think that, we're obviously not bound by the formal rules of evidence here. I do think Mr. Ferguson has made his point, but I think if Mr. Prisk is able to answer the question about whether it would have been relevant to use data from similar facilities to either argue against PennDOT's, standards that they applied or just to corroborate what was supplied as the end user or Amazon's information, I think it's a fair question.
I've personally worked on 7+ of these types of facilities in the last 2 to 3 years. And maybe every 6 months, the traffic schedules that were provided get updated and changed. And the facilities have different alterations and change. And so, the facility type that's proposed here on Churchill is, to my understanding, I don't know if there's another facility in operation of that type yet to say, here's one we can go and count. And so that was kind of the point that PennDOT and the borough kind of got stuck with, is like, well, if you don't have some data to support this specific type, then we're going to use ITE in lieu of that. So, you know, the type of facility keeps getting updated and adjusted, and the traffic schedules get updated and adjusted.
If Mr. Graziani might allow me to share a screen for a moment. I have 3 screens, so the hard thing is to know which
you should
one
be
is
able,
which.
Dwight.
I'm sorry?
You should be able to share it. All
Okay,
presenters
share
are able to
screen.
share, so.
Great, thank you, got it. All right, can you see that?
Just give it a moment to load.
Okay.
So Dwight, what I did was advance you to a co-host that might enable the screen. You're looking into the
Oh,
camera.
you know what? If I click share, that would probably help.
Thank you.
Okay. Any luck?
I see a hyperlink and it says Exhibit D.
Okay. All right, that's what you should be looking at right now. Oddly, I can't see it, but that's okay. So this is a section of the Amazon website, but it is about jobs in sortation facilities. And as we go down, here's the more of that website. Are you seeing it scroll?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We go down to locations. And so you can see several of them are, as I'm indicating with my cursor, which I hope you can see, are not in the United States. But the ones that are all indicated. And here's the list. All considered sortation facilities. And if I go back up here, a summary of that. Sorry, went too far. We counted 123 such facilities in the United States and 6 in Pennsylvania. Does that I'll now stop sharing this screen unless there's something on that you wanted to see. Okay, stop sharing. Does that refresh your recollection in any fashion as to the number of facilities, similar facilities in the United States?
No, like I said, I'm not tracking that.
Okay. If you have an actual operating facility that's comparable, wouldn't you agree that's probably the best source of information to determine traffic counts?
Because the facility types change with different generations, I don't know if you can just count an existing facility that's a different type and say it's going to operate the same as the one we're proposing.
Okay, well, you kind of changed my question because I assumed it was the same type, not a different type. But the ITE land use category, isn't that based upon data gathered from what are presumed to be similar facilities, and it could be data gathered over a 10-year period?
But I think the data in ITE for this type of e-commerce is relatively new, and there's not too many samples to kind of reference. And there's various different facility types within the end user's portfolio. And so I don't know if the data that's provided in there is really classified properly.
When you say in there, in where?
In ITE, that's listed in ITE.
Okay. All right. I want to direct your attention to page 99, which is page 7 of your report. Once again, if I counted the number, I think you use the word conservative more than you have cars you've counted. So this is another example here. This is the first, not the full paragraph. It's the last sentence in that incomplete paragraph. It says, the end user will utilize robotics throughout approximately 60% of the facility. And as such, the total building area used for trip generation purposes is conservative, since employees will only utilize the remaining 40%. So since you are using the ITE manual, can we agree that the ITE manual has no provision in this land use for breaking down whether or not the facility from which the data was gathered did or didn't use robotics?
Yeah, I'm not sure as the specifics of the sites that were collected in the ITE manual.
So then you wouldn't know, would you? You wouldn't know if the sites collected in the ITE manual did or did not use robotics.
Yes, I do not know.
And facilities like this, using robotics in distribution, for example, I mean, that's been going on for decades, has it not?
Again, I can't speak to those specifics.
Okay, then you really can't speak to whether or not your study is more conservative because robotics are used, can you?
Well, the use of robotics would reduce the amount of traffic. So
right, in the facilities which were studied in the ITE manual, as well as this facility. But you just said you don't know whether or not the facilities from which the data came in the ITE manual were facilities that also had robotics, right? You don't know.
correct. I'm unsure about the robotic use in those ITE facilities.
Right, so then your comparison of this facility to those as being more conservative because it uses robotics, really, you don't know if that's true or not.
Mr. Ferguson, can we move along, please? I think he's
okay. I'll move along.
Told you he doesn't know.
All right. Is it possible that some of the facilities from which data was gathered, which comprised the data in the ITE manual, were Amazon facilities?
Yes, it's possible.
So there too, we don't know either way, but what you can tell council is, isn't it possible to go into the land use code and to determine what types of facilities there were from which data was gathered to create that land use code?
There's a general description for each land use code.
Well, I understand that, but I'm asking you, isn't it possible to actually learn the facilities from which the data was derived in creating the standards of the ITE manual land use code 155?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now I'm turning to page 100. And that's page 8 of your traffic study, which says we read this before, but I'll read the whole thing. Based on the client-specific traffic data projections for this end user, it should be noted that these ITE calculations for total trips produces a more conservative result. So in other words, it seems like what you're saying is that the ITE manual required a higher traffic projection than the client-specific traffic data projections.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know the source of the client-specific traffic data projections? that were compared to the ITE manual? I know Amazon provided it to you, but do you know the facilities from which they obtained this data?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you know whether or not the source of the data, which comprised the client-specific traffic data projections, were traffic studies completed by traffic engineers?
I'm not sure.
Well, I was going to ask you, but I will, just to be clear. So, I mean, Langan is, it says on the cover of your report, is located in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Florida, sorry to the court reporter, Texas, California, Abu Dhabi, Athens, Doha, Dubai, Istanbul, London, and Panama. But as far as you know, the client-specific traffic data projections were not prepared by Langan at any other location. Is that right?
The client-specific schedule is provided by the Amazon transaction manager to the development team.
Okay, thank you. Do you know approximately the date, the date of the client-specific traffic data?
Objection. This is irrelevant, and it's getting repetitive and argumentative.
Mr. Ferguson, I think he did testify. He did not know how this information was generated, and he told you how he received it. So I'm not sure how much more we can ask him about it, because he obviously is not familiar with how it was generated or when it was generated.
Okay, if I guess if the witness accepts your summary of his testimony, I'll move on.
I don't think there's much room for interpretation there, Mr. Ferguson. I think he's several times.
All right, well, I don't want anybody else to speak for him, so we'll just assume, unless he disagrees, that is an accurate summary of his testimony. I'll move on.
Mr. Prisk, I apologize. Mr. Ferguson thinks I may be putting words in your mouth. Did I do such a thing?
I believe the latest schedule we received was from November of 2020. But I could confirm if needed.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll move on from this, but again, this is a linchpin of your study, is it not? Because you're justifying the numbers set forth in the ITE manual on the basis that they would produce a more conservative result than the client-specific data projections. Now, I know you've said that PennDOT required it, but that's not what this paragraph says. This says that this study will be more conservative because the numbers required by the ITE would essentially be a higher traffic count than what the client was providing. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But it turns out you know very little about the source of the client-specific traffic data. You don't have to answer that. I'll move on. Okay, I'd like to direct your attention to page 112 in the binder, and it's I don't know what it's an inserted plan, so I'm sorry it doesn't actually have a separate page number. What I'd like to ask you, Mr. Prisk, is I'd like to direct your attention to the southern portion of that site, where you will see that at the buildings south of the primary building, there are some existing buildings for which Amazon is going to construct additional parking spaces. How many new parking spaces are provided there?
Better question for my site civil engineer. I think this is to service the existing Westinghouse piece that's going to remain.
Okay, and there's a new road there, right?
Correct.
Okay. Are you, so I guess the question is, so are you seeking conditional use approval, which includes this new road onto Beulah Road?
I would have to defer to Mr. Metz or.
Well, you see around this site plan prepared by Langan, the portions of the development which are outside of the proposed development are faded, right? This seems to be, I mean, first of all, it is a new road, whether it's part of Amazon or not. It's a new road with a new parking facility, and it seems to be within the area that's part of the conditional use approval. So this is a second drive off of Beulah Drive. I'll call it Drive D, if you will. You've got A, B, C, and D. And is there a reason why this driveway D is not included in any of your simulations?
We were instructed that we didn't need to include this as a study area intersection.
By whom?
PennDOT, Churchill Borough.
Oh. And who at Churchill Borough told you that even though we're adding a second drive onto Beulah, it doesn't need to be studied? The traffic impact does not need to be studied.
You could reference the response to comment letters. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay. And so I'll ask you to turn now to page 118. And what is the document that we're looking at on page 118? What's the function of this document?
This is a figure that illustrates the routing of the projected truck and employee trips through the various study area intersections.
As well as the volume, right?
Yes.
Okay. So why would you leave out volume? It's just the routing, it's the volume of vehicles too, isn't it?
What trips is what refers to as number of vehicles.
Okay, fair enough. My misunderstanding. So if we look at page 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, none of them shows a second driveway which is going to be constructed onto Beulah. And your reason was that you were instructed not to include that in your study.
As part of the agreed upon study area intersections during the scoping process, that was not requested.
With PennDOT?
In Churchill Borough.
Okay. So there's really no information that you can provide Borough Council as to how this will affect the volumes on driveway A. We don't know the anticipated direction of the travel of those vehicles, right? We don't know. We just don't have any information on a second driveway being added to Beulah. Is that right? Not in your study anyway.
If it was an intersection of concern, it would have been included in the study area intersection.
Okay, so it's not of any concern to you.
But the reviewing bodies indicated it wasn't a concern to them.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Prisk.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I see we've had some other hands patiently awaiting their opportunity to ask some cross-examination questions of Mr. Prisk. I did not see the order, but I may be able to check that. Looks like, if I'm reading this right, it looks like Ms. Fox was the first hand up, although I could be wrong. Alex, do you know? Sorry, if you're not by your phone, why don't we go ahead and just.
Yeah, they do have their hands raised. So it's Jill Fox, Elizabeth Castman, Sandy Fox, Jill Stewart, Elizabeth, Sandy, and then we have Diana. Well, it's hard to tell. Some people are clicking on and off. So why don't we start with Jill, please?
Ms. Stewart?
Hi, yes. I just have a few questions regarding the traffic. They're showing like 2, 3, 4 trailer trucks during the prime time peak hours. And so what are we to expect during the off-peak hours when, you know, school isn't in session and they don't have to worry about that, and during the middle of the night? Because like I said, we live right on Greensburg Pike, 2 houses between us and their entrance and exit into the facility. So what can we expect there? And then, you know, with this traffic diet, where what currently is 4 lane is now going to be 1 lane each way with a center turn lane. I mean, we've been in this house since 1960 and 1962 probably. And we've never had the need for a turn lane, but you know, when we moved in, it was a 2-lane road, and then the county took part of our property and made it a 4-lane road, which took any kind of parking away from us. So what is your answer to, like, when we have to have repairmen, like plumbers or air conditioning repair, or, you know, roof repair or whatever, because that's where they have to park. And if you take away that extra lane where people are, you know, service people or repair people are allowed to park, and guests, but if you take that away, what are we to do? I mean, we've already been hurt so badly, our property, you know, and all those along the pike, by, you know, limiting our driveways. So I have those questions. And
Ms. Stewart, if I could, I apologize for interrupting, but I think it's going to be much more efficient if you just simply ask a question and then wait for a response and then move on to the next question, just to allow the witness to respond.
Okay, so I guess my initial question is, they're showing tractor trailers like 2 or 4, you know, going up and down the pike during prime time. What do we expect after prime time, during the middle of the night, during the middle of the day?
Based on the schedule that was provided, I think we anticipate an average of 25 in and out per hour.
Okay, which is...
And so there's some times where it'll be lower than that average and sometimes a little higher.
Right, but that's pretty excessive. And so then the other question is, as far as your traffic diet, I mean, what are you going to do for those of us that live along the pike and need that parking for repair people?
The road diet concept is something that you see review agencies pursuing when there isn't enough traffic volume to really warrant 2 lanes in each direction, and they want to address providing refuge for left turn lanes. The design of that road diet, which we had kind of contemplated as from Graham south, but within Churchill borough limits, that's going to be discussed during the design process with Allegheny County. And perhaps there's areas that will maintain the parking. Perhaps there's other areas that'll maybe have kind of a bicycle lane. And I'm not sure the exact design of it, but I think what the study illustrates is that you do not need to have 2 lanes each direction to accommodate the amount of traffic existing and proposed.
Probably not for the amount of traffic, because like I said, we've never required a turn lane to get into our driveway. But once you do this, yes, we will. And the question then becomes, because we've already lost a lot of our property to Allegheny County to widen the Greensburg Pike, and there is no parking, where do those repairmen people park? I mean, have you considered that how you're affecting the people that live directly on Greensburg Pike and you're taking away their parking?
Objection. This is irrelevant speculation.
I don't believe it is. I don't believe it is speculation. I mean, if you take away that.
Mr. I don't know that it's a question Mr. Prisk is going to be able to answer, but if you can't answer it, if you could just go ahead, Mr. Prisk, and let the Ms. Stewart know that that's the case, and we can move on to the next question.
Those details will be vetted during the design process with the county, and the borough will be reviewing those as well.
Ms. Stewart, do you have any other questions?
No, because that's kind of major and I haven't gotten an answer.
Well, and keep in mind too, and as we pointed out early on in the hearing, there you may not get the answers you want from these questions, but you will also have an opportunity when you're putting on your case to really explain your concerns, the issues that you feel you've identified with the development. So this is not your only crack at it. This is just, during cross-examination, you can only, get the witness to respond the way they're going to respond.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Kassman,
Alex?
please. Liz.
Kassman.
Chris, you're going to like my questions because they're all about the simulation.
Okay.
Would you anticipate that the traffic from, associated with the warehouse would be the same all year long, all months of the year?
No, there's a kind of normal operating capacity, and then they do have a few days that have a kind of seasonal influx.
Right. They call it a surge capacity. Were you able to simulate that in any way?
The simulations are not of those minimal seasonal influx days. They're of the typical operating conditions that you'll normally experience.
Right, but wouldn't the borough be curious to see how the traffic plan behaves under the surge, which is the surge conditions, which actually last for months, not for days?
It's my understanding that the seasonal upticks amount to maybe 14 days. That's what I've been told, primarily between kind of November to December, but then 1 or 2 in the summer months. So it's not a month duration. It's a handful of days that aren't necessarily back to back.
It could be that you're minimizing this issue, but I don't have evidence. But let's say that you're right, it's 14 days. So shouldn't you be able to tell the borough how your traffic plan is going to work on those 14 days? Because if it clogs up something, it's not as conservative design. If it doesn't work on those 14 days, what kind of a mess has been created? You have to demonstrate that no mess is being created, right?
We actually are tasked with doing some internal analyses for the end user to make sure that those handful of seasonal days will work with the improvements that are proposed.
And you will share them with the Borough Commission?
That's not been requested of us.
Okay. Alex, I hope you requested of them. Okay, so it looked like your simulations didn't include I-376. And specifically the vehicles getting on and off I-376. So in your experience, do the conditions on the parkway influence queuing on local roads?
If there's an incident or a congestion on the parkway, vehicles tend to try to find a shorter route. So I would agree with that.
Right, or they just queue up forever waiting for the traffic to move, right, on your local roads. So it seems like there's an important feedback on the conditions of the parkway that is missing from your simulations. Because as a commuter who commuted for years on that parkway, you anticipate sitting in traffic for 30 minutes at rush hour, or 45 minutes at the worst of it. And I think that it's hard to justify not including the simulation of the parkway in trying to describe the local traffic intersections. I'll move on. Are you familiar with the term sensitivity analysis?
I'm not sure in what context.
In the context of you have a model that has parameters that you have some uncertainty surrounding them. For instance, you don't know how many vehicles are going to come from what direction, or what times, or things like that. Or like, for instance, you assumed in your simulation that most of the employers are coming from the west, I believe. So what if you assume that most of them come from the south? Does that change your simulation? But what I'm really getting at is how you have a lot of uncertain parameters that Dwight has identified and that you know exist, where you just took the client's instruction and said, yeah, I'm going to use this pattern or that number. So
no, I'm sorry to cut you off. We didn't take information from our end user for our study. What I was trying to state was that, you know, the trip generation is based on ITE methodology, and the distributions were based on a SPC travel demand model. So the inputs for our study were primarily based on the review agency's input.
Right, and I'm saying that good engineering practice is to do an uncertainty analysis around that input rather than accepting it at face value, saying, yes, this is what you think it is, but it could be anywhere within a given range. And I'm going to show you that my design works on all values of the range. So you can feel it's a robust design. So I'm asking, why didn't you do sensitivity analyses on the unknowns in your model?
Well, the study kind of has a built-in sensitivity analysis in that it looks at, you know, the highest hourly volumes, and then the modeling itself kind of takes like the worst 15 minutes of that hour. And so all of that, and when I said before how the, you know, existing counts are probably higher than what they are today, like all of that level of quote unquote being conservative kind of accounts for if the distributions are skewed 5% here or there, which wouldn't impact the mitigation that we're proposing. So our mitigation measures will accommodate some of the sensitivity analysis things that I think you're bringing up.
Well, I'm bringing up things like your firm couldn't tell us where the trucks are coming from. So you should simulate a bunch of different places.
Ms. Kasman, I apologize for interrupting, but this is the time for you to ask questions of the witness, not to, you'll have time to give testimony later on at the hearing.
Okay. So, so can you think of any scenarios where that differ from what you simulated that might be important to account for as a borough manager? You know, are there things that in the normal business of life in Churchill that are not included in the traffic simulation that would be of interest?
Not sure I fully understand the question, but the purpose of the traffic study is to analyze what would be the highest traffic volumes so that it covers all other time periods.
I was getting at things like when the fire trucks have to leave the borough building and go somewhere, or, you know, an ambulance arrives, things like that. Is that something that your model could help us understand what, if the traffic plan is safe for those instances?
Those kind of periodic, what have circumstances aren't typically included in a study. And, you know, if it disrupts traffic for a short amount of time, then it should go back to what would be the kind of normal peak hour conditions.
Right. But I guess I'm wondering if the traffic disrupts the emergency vehicles. You know, what's the impact on the first responders? But that's a question, again, for the borough engineers to decide if it's important to ask. And finally, I noticed on the second scenario that you showed, there was a truck going down south on Grand Boulevard past the Amazon entrance, you know, the warehouse entrance, not turning into it. I thought that trucks were not going to be allowed on the county roads, the local roads. Is that incorrect?
The simulation incorporates existing traffic counts as well as our proposed trip generation. So if there was a truck illustrated heading south past our site, that must have been from an existing count that we had at the intersection. So not all trucks illustrated in the simulation are related to the development.
Right, but the point I wanted to get at, if the simulation allows illegal movement of trucks, can we trust it?
Well, it's reflecting actual conditions that we counted,
So,
plus our additional traffic.
So these big trucks are going down that road.
I could try to look at the existing counts, but it would be based on counts from our study.
That's my last question.
Thank you. Sandy, please. Sandy Fox.
Yes, Mr. Prisk, where will trucks wait if they arrive early for drop off to the site?
All trucks will be contained on site.
And are trucks allowed to arrive on site if they're significantly early?
I can't speak to the timing, but the truck court is designed to accommodate inbound and outbound trucks. So I think you're asking, would they stage off-site? And I'm responding that all trucks would be contained on-site, so they would never stage off-site.
From what I viewed of Amazon trucks in California, video of the Rialto, California Amazon warehouse, there were trucks waiting to enter the site lined up and down the road on the local roads, idling.
Yeah,
and I wonder, you know, I have to question whether or not it's true that they will all be allowed on site given Amazon's pattern with other distribution centers.
I can't speak to that specific site, but I know that, you know, we're tasked to design the site to accommodate all trucks on site.
Okay. what will the traffic look like, in your opinion, when the parkway is closed for major repairs, such as what will be happening with the Commercial Street Bridge on the Parkway East? How will the trucks route?
They would have to follow the same posted PennDOT detours as other vehicles.
So they would have to go on local roads.
Well, PennDOT detours would stick to state routes.
I don't know if there's state routes for all the detours from the Squirrel Hill Tunnel to Churchill.
It would follow a higher classification, so state, maybe county, but they wouldn't have a major detour on local roads.
Okay, but that's very worrisome to me. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fox.
Annie
think we have-
Yankis.
Come on now. Hi,
Hello.
I'm in. All right. Traffic, it's the most fascinating subject in the world these days. My questions are about only the Greensburg Pike activity. And tonight I'm only going to focus on the Greensburg Pike X, which is very important to me. I use it most of the time I'm coming out of the city. And I think most people who live in where I do on Williamsburg, on William Penn Highway and the routes there, the truck exit route would you do the same? Is it true that, I'm sorry, I've gleaned from, if I can find my notes. I've gleaned from the data that we've been given tonight in cross-examination mostly, is that there would be, I guess it's 1,416 trucks with, I'm talking about semi. I'm talking, can I call them big rigs, 18-wheelers? Do you mind if I use the slang big rig? Is that okay? Okay. So we only see, I'm sorry, there's 1,416 in peak hours, right? That was some of the numbers you gave. I can give them back to you. And then 500 in the off-peak hours on a 24-hour basis. Is that right? Does that sound about right? My math bad.
What?
This is the 636 plus the 780, 1,416, plus the 500 you told, I think Sandra Fox, for the, that's 25 in and out per hour off peak. So that's 20 hours a day. That would be about 500.
The total number of trucks we anticipate is just over 600 per day.
But we had.
What we
let's say trips.
Can you
let
him answer the question, please? Ms. Yankis,
okay.
Ms. Yankis, let the witness answer, please. Thanks.
Okay, sure.
So the total number of trucks based on the schedule provided to us is just over 600, so 612. The number of trucks that we were directed to use in our study was 672, and that's over the course of 24 hours.
Thank you. I'm just going to say that doesn't, you did not object when in the executive summary, it was pointed out that there were 636 peak during peak hours in the morning, or whatever, the generator peak hours, and 780 in the second generator peak hours. Is that right? You didn't.
I think you're referring to the total number of trips, which is cars and trucks. So that statement that was read was the total number of trips during those timeframes.
Okay, but then that wouldn't make sense if you have 1,000 employees and they're turning over every 8 hours, say, for shifts.
Can you ask a question, please?
That's my question. How does 1,000 employees using their parking spots and the trucks that are coming through, whatever it is, 600, how does that equal 600 a day? I just don't understand how the math works.
Maybe the statement's confusing. It's the total was during that 1 hour in the morning and then during that 1 hour in the evening. That's how much employee and truck traffic will occur. So it's, 1 hour during a 24-hour period and then another hour during a 24-hour period.
Oh, I thought they were 2 hours in your peak generators. I think you said 7 to 9 or something. Was I wrong?
It's the highest hour within that window.
Okay, all right. Well, that's interesting statistically. Then how many trucks do you think would be using the Greensburg exit on an average basis?
Well, it's a little bit more than half of that 600 number.
A little more than half. Okay. So if there is, it seems like on your graphics that the lane that's coming off the exit is a single lane up to the T intersection. Is that right?
I think the design will most likely have the existing lane peel off before that T, but those details are going to be vetted further. So it's a single lane exit that's going to, currently it opens up to 2.
Yeah.
So I think one will go down to that T and the other one will continue just as you currently drive it.
Okay, well, it goes into 2 lanes, right? As it goes on to Greensburg Pike, one for the right, one for straight and left. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So if it is possible and it is likely, given human behavior, that there would be a backup in that bottleneck, would that not be, with these big trucks that are much slower as they have to start and stop, wouldn't it be true that it would be a bit of an inconvenience for all the people who use that, like I do, our emergency vehicles, all the CMVs or commercial vehicles that come through, and our residents trying to get home at any time of day or night? That could bottle up, technically, especially during peak hours. So I'm very concerned that the Borough Council would approve a plan that makes it so that I can't get off at my own exit. Not every day. Some days they would, some days they wouldn't, but more likely than not, I would have to find another route home.
Ms. Yankis, if I could, if you have additional questions for Mr. Prisk, you're welcome to ask them. But
I'm done.
But you certainly are welcome to provide that testimony similar to what you just gave later on in the hearing.
In the year?
In the hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good. Thank you.
Do you have further questions?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Gavin?
Yes,
Her name was Diana?
Yankis, Y-A-N-K-E-S.
And next we have to speak Yolanda Covington, please.
Hello, good evening to all. Can you all hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity to ask a few questions. I appreciated seeing the simulation. I think this is my first time seeing that. But I did have a few questions. My question is about the simulation and about particular intersections that have been pointed out multiple times for being very problematic in terms of queuing of traffic. And this would be McCready and also the intersection of Beulah and William Penn Highway. So my question is, can you show or explain how your simulation accounts for the specific queuing of traffic at both McCready and Beulah and William Penn? And I'm asking this question because when I looked at the simulation, I did not see, I saw at the intersection of William Penn and Beulah, some of that traffic that does back up there, but I did not see the traffic that tends to come up Beulah, up the hill, which really goes all the way down to William Penn. And so I just didn't see that represented. And that's daily, every day, even when there's not much traffic in other spots, the traffic coming up Beulah up the hill leads to a bottleneck right in that area. And I think this was why PennDOT kept on asking questions about these intersections, right? And so my question is, I understand now that you've put a signal at McCready, which is one of my primary worries, because I live on Saybrook Drive, which is around from McCready. But I realize now if you have a signal there, traffic coming up Beulah will have to stop in order to allow the cars that are on McCready to make the left turn, right? And so if that happens, then all of the cars that are coming up Beulah will be backed up all the way down the hill. And I did not see that in the simulation. So could you please speak to that in terms of how this new signalized intersection at McCready will impact the traffic down Beulah?
What we didn't show you was simulations of existing conditions, which illustrated a lot of the problems that you're describing. So the models initially looked pretty bad, but then with the proposed improvements, it addresses a lot of the queuing impacts that you're referring to. The two signals are going to be coordinated together, which means they're going to account for when the signal at William Penn is green for a certain movement. It's purposely planned that way so that there isn't those backups in between McCready. And when McCready gets a green light, it has the ability to turn left and head south through another green light at William Penn. So those volumes are accounted for in the modeling with the coordination addresses those queuing impacts.
Okay, thank you for that and for clarifying that. Also, another question I have is again about the traffic on McCready. So right now then this signalized intersection deals with the traffic, hopefully, or tries to address the traffic that would come to the intersection of McCready and Beulah. But how will additional traffic on McCready Road be mitigated as employees, because these are again additional cars who are taking Business 22 if they're coming from the east or turning onto coming from Penn Hills, when they take McCready Road rather than the Parkway because of the difficulty of getting over quickly to that far left lane to get off of the exit. And so if they choose to take McCready and we have additional traffic, are there any plans for mitigating backups on that road as well? I've asked this question before because there are about 30 homes back here on that side of the road, and we've had traffic backed up all the way back from McCready, coming all the way down past Chapel Hill Road and going back towards the intersection from 22. So I'm just trying to anticipate, like a previous objector pointed out, what could happen when we have the additional truck traffic on the Parkway, how that might impact the decisions that employees make about where they drive and how they will get to this Amazon warehouse, and thus how it will impact McCready Road.
The traffic volumes that were used in our study anticipate about 3% of employee traffic coming from McCready, and that equates to less than 15 trips in the morning and less than 10 trips in the afternoon. There's no truck traffic assigned on McCready Road.
On what basis are you making this estimate that there would be only 15 trips? How do you know that it would be only 15 trips coming down McCready?
It's a combination of the demand model that SPC provided for where traffic would be coming from based on employment, and then the amount of traffic that the ITE manual estimated this facility would generate. So you apply the percentage to the number, and then you route it through the intersections.
Okay, it seems unrealistic to me, but you know, I'm not an expert in engineering, traffic engineering. I'm just someone who lives on this street and take this road every day to take my children to school, and have experienced these backups, including not being able to get off of Chapel Hill Road to even make a right to get onto McCready. because traffic is backed up so badly. So I just wanted to thank you for answering those two questions. And that would be it for me at this time.
Thank you. So Christopher McMullen, would you please speak?
Sure. This is Chris McMullen. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. What percentage of the trucks leaving the facility will be entering the Parkway westbound?
We estimate 60% will be heading inbound.
Okay. What route will these trucks use to enter the Parkway westbound?
It's a mix of coming out on the Greensburg Pike, turning right and heading up, or coming out onto Beulah, turning left to then enter from William Penn Highway.
Okay. What road do they have to take between the Greensburg Pike and William Penn Highway?
Graham Boulevard.
Graham Boulevard. Okay. What number of trucks will be leaving the facility at 10 p.m. using the schedule provided to you? I believe it's page 63 of the PDF, 640K FC.
I think the estimate I provided earlier was about an average of 25, I believe, per hour. So
using the schedule provided by Amazon.
Yeah, I believe it's about 25 per hour that's in and out. So 13 would be exiting and 60% of that 13 would be coming up Greensburg Pike to Grant.
So 10 p.m. 11, does that sound correct? Using the schedule provided by the end user.
I'm not sure what you mean by 10 p.m. to 11.
From the hours of 10 p.m. to 11.
Can you point to a page? Excuse me. What are you referring to? A specific page that's an exhibit?
It was page 63 of the traffic study.
Can you turn to page 63?
Traffic study that I have. It's labeled traffic data for entitlement use.